Hey guys, tonight we begin with the life as a worker in an Inca road crew. Thin mountain air, stone dust, and rope bridges swaying over endless drops. Your hands are raw, your feet ache, and the sun hasn't even risen. Behind you, the empire. Ahead, more stone, more sweat, and the hope that no one slips today. So, while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late-night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with the wind. Not a gentle breeze or mountain whisper, but a relentless, high-altitude current that tears at your clothing and seems to sneak behind your eyes. Your nose runs, your ears pop. Breathing feels like a chore you forgot how to do. You've barely arrived, and already you're regretting not faking a twisted ankle back in your village. The foreman, an older man with shoulders like quarry boulders and a scowl carved from centuries, waves you forward without so much as a greeting. He doesn't have to. You're not here for a chat. You're here because the state told you to be here. Because you are mida, conscripted labor. And today, your job is to build the road that will outlast you, your village, and probably the mountain itself. You're not alone. A line of others trails behind you, each bundled in layers of scratchy wool, faces sunburned in patches between streaks of dirt and exhaustion. Some look too young, others too old. All of you climb. The incline isn't subtle. It's the kind that turns your thighs into hot iron and your lungs into strained bellows. The narrow path you follow isn't a road yet, just loose earth, stones, and the occasional llama droppings baked into the dust like warning signs. Overhead, the sky is aggressively blue, the kind of blue that offers no comfort, only exposure. It feels like the sun sees everything up here, especially you, especially now. After 2 hours of silent hiking interrupted only by coughing, and the occasional muttered curse about altitude gods, you finally reach your first camp. There's not much to see. A circle of thatched shelters, perched like scabs on the shoulder of the slope. A few llamas chewing with open indifference, and a pile of tools that looks suspiciously like a punishment. The moment you drop your pack, someone thrusts a pickaxe into your hands and points toward a stack of uneven stones that apparently need to not be uneven anymore. You're given no instructions. You're expected to know. The Inca state assumes competence and punishes inefficiency with more work, not advice. Your hands aren't used to this. You've done plenty of farm labor before, of course, but this isn't soft soil and bean sprouts. This is sheer rock, the kind that laughs at your efforts. Your first few swings bounce off the stone like a drunk mosquito, doing more to rattle your bones than chip the surface. The older workers eye you without comment. One of them eventually sidles over and adjusts your grip without speaking. The correction helps a little. You feel a small shard of stone give way, and you nearly weep with joy at the sight of even that tiniest progress. Still, progress is measured here in finger lengths, and your task is to level a surface that's currently trying to throw you off the mountain. The stones must be shaped to fit so precisely that you couldn't slide a blade of grass between them when finished. It's not enough to pile rock on rock. This is a sacred duty, because the road isn't just for walkers and llamas. It's for messengers of the state, for warriors, and most terrifyingly, for royal inspectors who might appear at any time, unsmiling and unimpressed. By mid-morning, you understand why everyone else's arms look like tree roots wrapped in skin. You can barely lift your axe without trembling. Your neck is stiff, and the cold air hasn't warmed even a little despite the rising sun. You're told the road must reach the next tambo, a kind of roadside inn used by runners and inspectors, before the month is out, which means your legs will be climbing, your back will be bending, and your fingers will be bleeding for the next 4 weeks. At best, more, if the gods are in a funny mood. A Chusky, the imperial runner, passes through the camp without stopping, his sandals slapping the stones in a rhythm that sounds far too cheerful. He's carrying a quipu strapped across his chest, a tangle of knotted cords that somehow contains messages for people more important than you. He doesn't slow down. He doesn't glance at you. He just vanishes up the path like he's made of wind and ceremonial coca. One of the workers chuckles darkly, then mutters something about how they'll probably send another dozen messages about this section being behind schedule. You're not sure if he's joking. After a break that barely lasts long enough to chew a cold potato and drink from your shared water skin, you're told to begin hauling stone blocks from the quarry about 50 steps down the cliffside. The steps, of course, are more suggestion than structure. Uneven divots carved into the rock, where dozens before you have stumbled, and maybe a few didn't come back up. You lower yourself carefully, feet slipping in the gravel, hands gripping whatever jutting root or awkward stone presents itself. At the base, you find the stones. Immense, heavy, almost mocking in their silence. They sit there like they've been waiting centuries just to ruin your afternoon. With the help of two others, you begin the process of levering one onto a hide sled, grunting and growling like animals with matching injuries. Then comes the ascent. Back up, inch by inch, muscles screaming, every breath wheezing. The sled jerks. Your foot slips. For a moment, you're certain gravity has decided you've had enough. But somehow, the stone holds. You cling to the slope with shaking arms, eyes locked on the white-knuckled grip of the man in front of you, who seems just as panicked as you are. Eventually, the stone arrives where it's needed. It's imperfect, of course. One side bulges, and someone in charge frowns at it for too long before waving you to the chiseling team. More reshaping, more sweating, more wondering how anyone ever thought building roads on the sides of cliffs was a sensible idea. And yet, here you are, helping make it happen, stone by stone, bruise by bruise. As the sun reaches its peak, you realize you haven't spoken more than 10 words all day. Everyone works in silence, partly from exhaustion, partly because there's nothing left to say that hasn't already been muttered to the mountain. A few workers hum low melodies under their breath, the kind of tunes passed down from their grandparents, meant to keep rhythm more than morale. Even the llamas seem subdued, watching your efforts with blank disinterest as they chew grass and occasionally spit in your direction without malice. By now, your shoulders ache in a way that feels permanent. Your skin is both sunburned and wind-chapped. You've discovered muscles you didn't know you had, and they all hate you. Still, you press on, because this road must stretch, must connect, must serve. The Inca believed their empire was the center of the world, and the road is its thread, stitched into valleys and cliffs, woven across rivers, binding mountains to mountains like a spider's web of stone. And you, lucky conscript, are one of the weavers. The morning does not so much arrive as it creeps in slowly, seeping into your bones with a chill that no blanket can conquer. There is no rooster crowing, no warm hearth, no promise of breakfast wafting through the camp. Just the cold breath of the mountain, sharp as obsidian and twice as rude, waking you before your eyes are even fully open. You're still wrapped in your rough-spun cloak, curled against the hard-packed dirt floor of your makeshift shelter, when someone nudges you with a boot and mutters something about needing hands at the cliff face. It takes you a full minute to remember where you are, and another to suppress the groan rising in your throat. The llama is already awake. It watches you from the corner, chewing slowly, as if judging you for sleeping longer than necessary. You brush frost from your eyebrows and pull yourself upright, muscles tight and resentful from yesterday's struggle with stone and slope. Outside, the air is colder than any rational air has a right to be. Your breath comes out in small clouds, and your fingertips go numb, even before you can lace your sandals. There's no coffee here, no fire pit gathering, just the slap of your soles against icy rock, and the dull dread of knowing the day hasn't even properly started. The foreman greets you with the same warmth as a fallen boulder. He tosses a chisel toward your feet and points to a jagged section of cliff wall that's supposed to be a switchback turn by the end of the week. This means carving out a ledge wide enough to walk 2 llamas abreast without toppling into the ravine below. You swallow your nerves, pick up the chisel, and join 2 other workers already hammering rhythmically against the face of the mountain. The sound is not music. It's more like a pulse, sharp, metallic, relentless. Your fingers sting on contact with the iron, and the first few blows jar your arms like someone's trying to rattle your bones loose. Chiseling isn't glamorous. It's not like the stories say, where master masons shape stone with graceful taps and poetic vision. It's mostly grit in your teeth, cold sweat down your spine, and the bitter taste of mountain dust in your mouth. You strike, again and again, trying to carve out a clean surface from something that deeply resents being altered. The rock feels older than language, and more stubborn than any bureaucrat you've ever met. Someone next to you whistles through their teeth, a short tune meant to break the monotony, and you hear a low chuckle in return. It's the kind of camaraderie that doesn't need words, just shared misery and mutual understanding. No one wants to be the one to speak too loudly and bring down a scolding from the supervisors. They're not cruel, exactly, but they have the stare of men who've watched hundreds of laborers come and go and remember none of them. Your individuality is about as useful here as a feather in a landslide. Still, there's a strange pride beginning to creep into your work. As you chisel along a fault line, your partner nods in approval at the clean line you've carved. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be, just tight-fitting and able to carry weight for generations. The Incas don't believe in mortar. Every stone must find its match through sheer willpower and abrasion. There's no room for error, but there's also no fancy tools. Just your hands, your eyes, and whatever knack for geometry the mountain allows you to borrow. By mid-morning, you've worn down a groove wide enough to step along comfortably. It's still a long way from usable, but it's a start. You pause to stretch your arms, turning your face to the sky, where condors drift lazily on invisible currents. You wonder if they ever watch the little ants crawling along the cliffside and think, that's the dumbest way to spend a life. Then again, condors don't have empires. Or quipu, or road crews conscripted from across the land to build an imperial nervous system 1 chisel stroke at a time. An older worker leans close during a short break and tells you about a place farther up where the road splits into 3 levels, one for nobles, one for commoners, and one for herding animals. You ask how they keep people from using the wrong level, and he grins as he replies, "They don't. That's what the guards are for." He tells you about the Apachitas, small rock piles placed along the trail as spiritual offerings, and how travelers stop to add a stone or two, whispering prayers to the mountain spirits before moving on. You wonder if one day someone will stop at a place you helped build and leave a stone without ever knowing who carved the ledge beneath their feet. The sun finally climbs high enough to touch the cliff with its warmth, and for a brief moment, you feel human again. The stone softens slightly under its glow. The wind dies down to something almost manageable, and your fingers regain enough feeling to wrap securely around your tool. You take a deep breath of thin air and get back to work. The moment doesn't last. Of course it doesn't, but it's enough to get you through another stretch. As you shape the stone, you think of the ones who walked these paths before you. Chasquis sprinting with royal orders knotted in their cords. Inca generals marching toward distant provinces. Pilgrims making their way to sacred sites. They all moved across these mountains on roads like this, built by hands like yours. It's humbling in a way, and also faintly terrifying. You're part of something massive, but also easily forgotten. The road remembers, even if the Empire doesn't. By the time the supervisor calls for the next team rotation, your arms feel like boiled corn stalks. You lower your chisel and wipe your brow with the sleeve of your tunic. Then look back at the ledge you've been shaping all morning. It's uneven, flawed, and exactly the right size. Tomorrow, someone will bring stones to fit into it. Someone else will pound them into place. In a week, it'll just be a section of the road, indistinguishable from the rest. But you'll know. You were here. Your hands shaped the path, even if just for a few meters. As you walk back toward the camp for a quick rest and a few bites of charqui, dried meat tougher, and the stone you've been carving, you catch sight of the same condor. Or maybe another. It rides the wind with the arrogance of something that's never had to chisel a ledge before sunrise. You don't envy it. Not exactly. But part of you would trade all the potatoes in Cusco just to float above the cliffs for a single morning, watching the crews labor below, knowing that for once, you didn't have to. You don't hear the bridge before you see it. It doesn't creak, doesn't groan, doesn't whistle. It just waits, perfectly still, perfectly terrifying, suspended between two sheer cliffs by what appear to be little more than grass ropes, twisted and woven by hands probably no more skilled than yours. The structure stretches across a yawning chasm, so deep you can't see the bottom, only mist curling upward like steam from a boiling pot. Somewhere far below, a river rushes through the valley, its roar muffled by distance, but loud enough in your mind to make you reconsider every decision that brought you here. They call it a Kuzwa Shaka, a rope bridge strung between impossible places, rebuilt every year in an elaborate ceremony that somehow manages to combine engineering with sheer madness. It's your team's turn to maintain it, and maintenance, in this case, means inching across the thing with a bundle of fresh rope fibers, patching and tightening as you go, all while pretending that your knees aren't shaking so hard they could trigger a landslide. The foreman is already there, standing at the near end of the bridge like a bouncer to the worst party ever hosted. He doesn't say anything when you arrive, just gestures at the roll of fibers in your hands and points toward the bridge deck. Someone else on your team clears their throat and mutters that the last guy who hesitated ended up cooking tubers back in his home village. The implication is clear. You walk or you walk away for good, and nobody wants to be that story. You approach the first few feet with the caution of someone inspecting a sleeping puma. The walkway isn't made of planks. It's woven from grass and reeds, bundled together into a kind of braided lattice that dips gently under your weight and sways just slightly, even in still air. Two side ropes serve as your only guide rails. They aren't so much protection as moral support. You try not to look down. That lasts about 4 steps. The view is expansive. A green valley floor far below, soft clouds rolling in like ghostly spectators, and cliffs that seem to rise and fall forever. The bridge swings a little under your feet, not violently, just enough to remind you that physics is watching. Each step is a test of your trust, not in the bridge, but in every single person who's ever tied one of these fibers. It's not just your weight you're placing on them. It's your life, your lunch, and the next few decades of family legend. Your partner behind you mutters encouragement through clenched teeth. He's trying to sound brave, but you can hear the tremor in his voice, the same one currently echoing in your knees. You're about halfway across when you reach the first frayed section. It's not dramatic, just a loose bundle of fibers unwinding slightly, but it's enough to trigger every anxiety your brain has ever stored. You crouch, plant your feet as firmly as one can on a flexible rope lattice, and begin unwinding your own replacement strands. The repair process is meditative in a strange high-stakes kind of way. You feed fresh strands into the existing weave, twist them into place, pull them tight, test the tension, then repeat. The rhythm begins to slow your heartbeat, if only slightly. You're not alone in this. Hundreds of people across the empire know this same technique. Entire communities gather every year to rebuild bridges like this one from scratch. Men and women twist rope with their bare hands, soak fibers for flexibility, and sing as they braid. The song's older than memory, the pattern's older than Cusco. Still, even tradition doesn't make you feel entirely safe when a gust of wind picks up and makes the bridge dance. Not a graceful waltz, more of a drunken sway. You grip the side ropes hard and press your weight downward. The others behind you freeze in place, instinctively crouching low. The wind howls for a few seconds, then disappears as suddenly as it arrived, leaving behind only your pounding heart and the faint rustle of grass fibers shifting beneath your feet. Someone behind you makes a joke about flying like a condor, but no one laughs. Once the patching is done, you resume your crawl forward. The rest of the bridge seems to stretch even farther now, as if time itself has slowed to watch you struggle. Each step feels longer than the last. Your thighs burn, your back aches from bending, and your eyes keep darting to places they probably shouldn't. Like the places where old repairs seem just a little too weathered, or where the railing rope frays into tufts. As you near the far side, a group of workers on the opposite cliff begins shouting instructions and waving their arms. You can't make out every word, but the message is clear. The next section is worse. There's a long strip where the main support rope has sagged under heavy rain, and your job is to loop in a thick counterstrand to redistribute the weight. Of course it is. Because apparently, the mountain gods woke up today and chose comedy. You lower yourself again, fingers trembling as you tug the coil of counterstrand from your satchel. It's heavier than expected, and it takes the combined effort of you and your partner to loop it over the worn sections and lash it into place. Every knot you tie feels like a wager. You don't have time for perfection. Just tight, tight, and tighter. That's the mantra. You whisper it under your breath as the fibers bite into your skin and the bridge trembles with every motion. The wind returns. Not a gust this time, but a steady, cold stream that presses into your back like a judgment. You push forward, teeth clenched, legs locked in a careful dance that's neither swift nor smooth. Finally, miraculously, you feel solid ground beneath your feet. The stone ledge of the far cliff greets you like an old friend you never appreciated until you nearly died without them. Your knees almost buckle, but you hold yourself upright because a small crowd is watching. They nod with the barest hints of approval. One of them hands you a cup of warm chicha, a fermented corn drink that burns just enough to remind you you're alive. You sip it gratefully, eyes locked on the bridge behind you, now gently swaying as if mocking your former fear. Someone tells you this was one of the shorter spans. There's another bridge a few days up the trail that stretches nearly double the length, across a gorge where winds shriek like angry spirits. You try to smile at the joke, but it lands like a prophecy. The road continues, the empire moves, and there's always another bridge ahead. You just hope the rope holds. You don't notice them at first. The camp is buzzing with the usual chaos. Stonecutters shouting over the sound of chisels, runners darting through with urgent footsteps, and the occasional llama expressing its disapproval of literally everything. But then the workers go quiet. Not all at once, but in a slow ripple, like a hush moving downhill. The air itself seems to tighten. You pause mid-swing, chisels still pressed to the wall, and follow everyone's gaze toward the trail. They arrive without fanfare, no trumpets, no manners, not even dust in their wake. Just two men in dark tunics, cloaks trimmed in dyed wool that marks them as something more than ordinary. One carries a long staff, carved with symbols you can't quite decipher. The other carries no weapon, no scroll, just a wooden board strapped across his chest. From this board hang rows of knotted cords in various colors. A quipu, a story in knots. A report you cannot read, but which could decide whether your camp gets more rations or more punishment. The inspector doesn't speak at first. He walks slowly, appraising the slope with the cold patience of someone who has no interest in what you've already done, only what hasn't been finished yet. He kneels beside a stretch of recently paved road, fingers brushing over the stone seams. His expression doesn't change. That's the worst part. You'd feel better if he frowned or scoffed or muttered. Instead, there's only silence. Calculating silence. The Quipu keeper steps forward, flipping one of the hanging cords and tightening a series of knots with practiced hands. It's a language without letters, but every twist and spacing means something. Number of workers, time spent, food consumed, stone laid, distance covered. You wonder which of those cords contains your work. You wonder if it already knows you're behind. The foreman approaches and bows slightly. Nothing dramatic, just enough to acknowledge authority. He exchanges a few low words with the inspector, too quiet for you to hear. The inspector nods once, then gestures toward the cliff face where your team has been working for the past 3 days. The foreman signals you forward. You glance around, but no one else moves. Apparently, this honor or punishment is yours alone. You lead the inspector to your section, pointing out where the ledge has been widened and where the stone has been shaped to support the next layer of paving. He doesn't nod, doesn't blink even, just crouches, runs a hand along a joint, and pulls a small pebble from between two stones. He holds it up without a word. Your stomach drops. It's not the stone itself that's the problem. It's the fact that a pebble could fit at all. Every gap, however small, is a flaw, and flaws invite water. Water invites weakness. Weakness invites collapse. The inspector drops the pebble and says nothing. The Quipu keeper ties a new knot. You're dismissed with the kind of look that suggests invisibility, and yet you can't stop sweating. It's not just fear. It's the weight of the state pressing down on you. A state that sees through numbers, remembers through chords, and judges through silence. The Inca Empire doesn't need scrolls or ink. It has memory woven in wool, wrapped around sticks, and tied in ways no outsider has ever fully understood. It is efficient, and it is watching. The rest of the day moves more quickly than usual, not because the work is lighter, but because everyone is suddenly sharper, faster, more careful. The inspector might still be watching from the ridgeline, or maybe someone else is. There's always another set of eyes, another report being tied up, another Quipu being wound. You start measuring your movements more precisely, laying each stone like it's part of a mosaic being viewed from the sky. You imagine Pachacuti himself, peering down from a cloud, stroking his chin and nodding. Or frowning. Probably frowning. Later in the day, one of the runners returns from the upper Tambo and brings news. The inspector's Quipu indicated a materials shortage and a slight deviation in the ledge's angle. It's not enough to stop the project, but enough to trigger a higher allocation of work. Your team's quota is increased by a third. No protest is made. That's not how things work here. You simply chisel harder and sleep less. As the sun begins to fall behind the ridges, you gather with a few others near the fire pit. The talk is subdued. Someone tells a story about a Quipu message that once led to the exile of an entire village for misreporting their potato harvest. Another claims the chords can carry secret meanings, hidden beneath the surface structure like a whisper inside a shout. Whether or not it's true doesn't matter. The power of the Quipu isn't just in what it records. It's in the belief that it records everything. You lie awake that night longer than usual, listening to the wind creep through the camp. The inspector is gone, his footsteps erased by the breeze, but the sense of being measured still lingers. You think about the cords, about the hands that tie them, about the possibility that somewhere in Cusco, a priest is unrolling your day in knots, reading your sweat like a story. And you think about the road, this endless, winding artery you've been pressed into shaping, and wonder who will walk it centuries from now, never knowing how many knots it took to build. When the sun sits high enough overhead to bleach every stone, a blinding shade of pale, you know you've made it, at least to the part of the day where nobody can question the merit of a break. No horn sounds, no bell rings, but everyone stops moving within the same breath, as if some ancient, unspoken rhythm still pulses beneath the dust and granite. You let your tools drop to the ground with a satisfying clatter, more from defiance than relief, and shake the stiffness from your fingers one by one. Your stomach has been making small, sarcastic complaints for the last hour, and now it gets its wish, though barely. Lunch on the road crew isn't exactly a celebration. It's more like a strategic truce between your body and the Empire. A short reprieve before both resume trying to outlast each other. You shuffle over to a rocky overhang where the other workers are already settling into crouched positions, chewing quietly, wiping sweat from their faces with the corners of their sleeves. No one is laughing. No one is talking much. Just the rhythmic sounds of chewing and breathing, and the occasional groan from someone's knees. Your rations today are what they always are. A small bundle of choclo, giant kernel corn wrapped in a cloth, a hard puck of charky jerky tougher than mountain leather, and a round clay canteen of lukewarm water that tastes faintly of riverbed. You take a bite of the jerky and regret it immediately. It doesn't yield so much as it fights back. Your teeth saw at it for a while, before giving up and letting it sit in your cheek like a defiant secret. The corn is easier, chewy, sweet, earthy, and fills your mouth with a kind of satisfaction that borders on spiritual. You wash it down with a long pull from your water flask and realize too late that you finished it too quickly. Someone nearby points to the slope above and mutters that a herd of llamas passed this way early in the morning. You squint toward the path, see nothing but a few scattered droppings that steam in the sunlight, and nod anyway. Conversations during lunch tend to hover between vague observations and quiet complaints. There's no energy left for anything else. You hear someone behind you tell a story, low and slow, about a cousin who helped build a tambo near Machu Picchu and came home with silver trinkets and a limp that never quite healed. The story ends without a punchline, as most things do up here. You shift your weight to the other hip and try to find a flat stone to lean against, but the whole mountain seems to be made of angles designed to punish sitting. Just as you feel your shoulders starting to relax, a shadow crosses your face. You glance up to see the foreman standing over you, arms folded, with the look of a man who's learned that time is always wasting. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. Lunch is over. Maybe it never really started. You tuck what's left of your corn into the corner of your cloak for later and rise slowly, every joint offering commentary as you do. The sun is hotter now, its light reflecting harshly off the pale stone and forcing you to squint. You retie your head wrap and return to the ledge like a reluctant moth circling a very angry flame. Back at your post, the tools feel heavier than they did before lunch. The chisel's handle digs into your palm like it holds a personal grudge. You press it to the stone and begin again, working in short, economical movements. Every motion is a negotiation between effort and endurance. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to keep going. Keep striking, keep shaping, keep moving. The afternoon moves differently after lunch. Slower, more difficult. The morning chill is gone, replaced by heat that seems to rise from the stone itself, curling into your lungs and turning sweat into glue. Your tunic sticks to your back. Your breath comes shorter. You keep working. What else is there? No shade, no pause, no mercy. Just the task ahead and the path behind. Someone 2 paces over lets out a sharp curse and drops his mallet. He bends to pick it up, staggers slightly, and steadies himself against the wall. No one laughs. No one helps. Everyone is too focused on the stone in front of them to spare much sympathy. Your mind starts to wander in the heat. You think of the runners, chaskies, who blaze across these same roads, sometimes covering hundreds of miles in a few days, swapping messages like passing fire between torches. They rest at tambos, drink chicha, eat well. Or so you imagine. It's a romantic image, but you know better. Even the runners drop sometimes. Even they burn out. The roads chew everyone up eventually. You just happen to be the one feeding them right now. After another hour, the foreman allows a brief break to fetch water from the stream that trickles down the cliffside. You walk with the others in a loose, dragging line, faces drawn tight, legs stiff. The stream is clear, cold, and insultingly beautiful, like it doesn't care how hard your day has been. You kneel to drink, cupping the water with both hands and letting it spill down your wrists. It tastes of moss and rock, wild and clean. You linger for a moment, letting your hands soak in the chill until you can feel your fingers again. On the way back, someone slips on a gravel patch and lands hard. He gets up slowly, muttering about bruised pride more than pain, and everyone nods in understanding. Gravity is the mountain's oldest joke. It plays it often and with commitment. You return to your ledge with fresh scrapes on your knuckles and dust in your teeth. The sun starts to lean westward, and the angle of the light shifts. Shadows stretch long across the slope. You feel your pace pick up slightly, not from energy, but from the subtle fear that the workday might stretch longer if the quota isn't met. There's a rhythm now: cut, shift, cut again. It's not grace exactly, but it's yours. Even the mountain seems to acknowledge your persistence, allowing a little more progress than usual, as if to say, fine, you can have this inch. But just the inch. By the time the call comes to stop for the evening, your legs ache like hollow logs, and your wrists throb with every heartbeat. You lean against the wall you've just finished carving and close your eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to let your pulse slow. Someone hands you the remainder of your corn from lunch. It's warm now, soft, and slightly sweet. You chew in silence, looking out at the road curling away into the distance, and wonder how much farther it still has to go. The answer, of course, is always farther. By the time the last stone is laid and the tools are gathered, the sun has dipped behind the ridgeline, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers over the ledge. The wind returns, not playful this time, but sharp, whistling through the crevices like it's testing the strength of your work. You shuffle back toward camp in near silence, your limbs heavy and your breath shallow, the ache in your muscles spreading like slow fire. The sky above shifts from gold to indigo, pinpricked with stars that emerge as if summoned by exhaustion alone. You duck inside your sleeping shelter, which is generous to call a shelter at all. It's more of a lumpy rectangle of woven grass and stone scraps, barely tall enough to sit upright. Inside, your world narrows to shadows, the sound of your heartbeat, and the soft rustle of wool as the llama you're sharing space with shifts and exhales in your face. Its breath is warm and smells faintly of chewed cactus. You accept this. You've accepted worse today. You curl into yourself, wrapping your cloak tight, bones settling into hard dirt. Outside, the wind groans like some ancient spirit pacing the ridgeline. Inside, the llama snorts, turns in a circle, and then decides to lie directly on your foot. You don't move it. You're too tired. You fall asleep to the sound of stone cooling under stars, the road stretching silent and unfinished into the dark. And yet far to the north, beyond the cliffs and rivers and sleeping camps, a boy is waking beneath a golden roof in Cusco. The Earthshaker's breath rises in the capital, and the pulse of the empire begins to stir. The road may be the spine, but the mind of the Inca lives in him. Before the world knows him as the Earthshaker, before the temples, the expansion, the empire that will stretch from jungle to desert, he is simply a boy. One among many in a palace of rituals and bloodlines, half-brothers, hierarchy, and duty. His name is Cusiupanqui. It means glorious deed, though no one yet treats him like a prophecy. He is not his father's favorite. That honor belongs to another son, a brother born of a different mother, one more willing to nod without question, more comfortable draped in titles than ideas. Kusi watches from the side of ceremonies, from the quiet corners of Cusco's high walls, learning not just what is spoken, but what is not. The palace is a place of stone, stones that breathe with warmth during the day and grow cold as bone by night. Walls without mortar, fitted so tightly together that not even a hair could slip through their seams. They say that Cusco is the navel of the world, and he is raised to believe it. But a navel is also a center point, fixed, motionless, and the boy is not content to stay still. When the lessons end for the day and the flutes fall quiet, he wanders. Through the stepped gardens his ancestors carved from the mountain, through the sacred halls that hold golden effigies of the sun, through rooms lined with featherwork and jaguar pelts. But his favorite place is the overlook, high above the city, where he can watch the people move like ants, farmers, masons, priests, messengers, all carrying something, all going somewhere. It's there that he first senses the change. He feels it before it happens. The air grows thick, birds fall quiet, even the llamas shift uneasily in the fields. Then, in the darkness before dawn, the earth moves. Not violently, not like a tantrum, but a warning. A low rumble that rolls through the soil, not enough to send stones tumbling, but enough to wake every sleeper in the palace. Kusi rises without panic, walks barefoot to the courtyard, and stares toward the silhouette of the mountain to the south, Salcante, the sacred peak. The stars flicker over its shoulders, unconcerned. But he stands still, waiting, as if something might speak again. When the priests gather, they bring bowls of sacred maize, bones of young llamas, bundles of coca leaves. They cast them onto woven cloths and read the way the bones land. The answer is uncertain. Some kernels fall upright, which is good. Others fall broken, which is not. The patterns do not speak clearly. The high priest frowns, chewing coca thoughtfully, then declares that the gods are restless. A sacrifice will be made, not human yet. For now, they offer the finest white llama and let its blood soak into the roots of the gardens. Kusi watches from a distance, lips pressed into a thin line. He begins to ask questions no one is used to hearing from someone his age. Not just about rituals or the ancestors, but about how the empire functions, how decisions are made, how far the runners can truly travel in one day, why some of the outer villages speak their own dialects, and why no road yet connects the valleys to the sea. The adults answer him vaguely, or not at all. That is not for you to worry about, his uncle says once, patting him too roughly on the shoulder. But he does worry. He dreams of patterns, circles within squares, cities mapped like constellations. He dreams of movement, not stillness. His father, the Sapa Inca Viracocha, is strong but aging. His grip on power is undisputed, but his gaze is increasingly distant. He trusts in the old ways, in divinations and bloodlines, and sacred architecture that stood for centuries. When he speaks of the gods, not of the people. He sees an empire carved by ancestors and meant to remain exactly as it is. Kusi sees something else. He sees what could be. There is a restlessness in him that no amount of ceremony can quiet. His tutors try to shape him into a noble of quiet obedience. His older brothers mock him for his constant wandering and questions. But at night, he climbs to the terrace alone and stares across the valley. He traces imaginary roads with his finger in the sky, picturing how they cut across the hills, hugging the cliffs, linking towns that have never spoken. Not just for trade or war, but for unity, for empire. He doesn't yet have the words for it, but it grows in him like the low hum of the mountain before it speaks. And always, in the distance, the volcano waits. It has not erupted. It has not split the sky or rained fire, but something in its silence unnerves the priests. Even the oldest among them admit they cannot remember such long stillness. When the mountains sleep for too long, one whispers during a ceremony, it is not peace, it is patience. Kusi hears this and nods quietly. He begins to collect stones, not just to build, but to study their shape, their weight, how one edge might fit against another without space between. He asks the masons to show him how to find the grain of a stone, how to make it obey. At first, they laugh. Then, when he returns every day, they stop laughing and begin to teach. He listens to them as carefully as he listens to the priests. And by 13, he can sketch the outline of a terrace wall from memory. One day, as he stands watching a group of mid-laborers hauling stone for a new shrine, he murmurs that it's all being done wrong. The angles are off, the foundation too soft. A royal guard overhears him and threatens to report his arrogance. But a master mason steps forward and says, "Let the boy speak. I think he sees something." And so he does. The news arrives not with thunder or messengers riding hard across the hills, but in a slow, whispering creep. Whispers from the southern frontier. Whispers from traders whose roots grow quiet. Whispers from runners who do not raise their voices. The Chanca are coming, a fierce people from the Apurimac region, long rivals of the Inca, hardened by mountain living and sharpened by decades of tribal warfare. They are not requesting diplomacy. They are not delivering tribute. They are marching straight for Cusco. At first, the palace refuses to believe it. There's talk of exaggerated rumors, border scuffles, the usual seasonal unrest. But the whispers become patterns, then plans, then certainty. The Chanca army is vast, tens of thousands. Some say as many as 40,000 strong, and their momentum is not one of raiding. It's a campaign. Their intentions are clear. Sack Cusco, shatter Inca power, and take the navel of the world for themselves. The Sepa Inca Viracaca responds not with orders, but with silence. He retreats not symbolically, not in prayer, but physically, leaving the capital and taking with him his favored heir. His retreat is called a pilgrimage, a moment of sacred withdrawal, but in truth, it is abandonment. He leaves behind a city without its center, a people without their protector. He leaves behind Kusi Apanqui. Kusi does not follow. He is not in line for the throne. He does not yet wear the royal fringe of the Inca ruler, nor sit on the golden bench of judgment. But when the city turns its eyes inward, when every noble begins looking for a voice, it is Kusi's that rises above the rest, not by command, but by clarity. While others speak of waiting for signs, he speaks of reinforcing walls. While priests prepare to evacuate idols, he gathers warriors. He sends runners in every direction, summoning fighters from the sacred valley, the jungle edge, the cold north. He offers promise in exchange for loyalty. He offers spoils in exchange for risk. But most of all, he offers certainty where no one else dares to. And the people listen. He does not wait for council approval. He walks the city's defenses himself, noting weak points in the terrace walls, checking the supply caches beneath the temple courtyards. He orders the river gates prepared, the irrigation canals rerouted. If the city must burn, it will not go down thirsty. Armories open, granaries empty into warriors' packs. The nobility watches with unease as this son, unblessed by his father's favor, moves through the city like he was born to its bones. The Chanca approach quickly. Advance parties reach the outskirts. They burn fields, scatter herds, leave messages painted on stones in blood. When they arrive, they do not encamp, they surround. They beat drums carved from jaguar skin. They scream songs meant to unmake the enemy before a spear is thrown. And Cusco holds its breath. The battle that follows is not a single event, but a siege, a series of shocks and lunges that test the city's every wall. The Chanca strike from all sides, battering the terraces, flooding into the lower neighborhoods with obsidian clubs and war cries thick with years of hatred. But they find not panic, but resistance. The defenders move through alleys they know by memory. They fire sling stones from rooftops. They set traps where the Chanca least expect, collapsed staircases, hidden pitfalls, narrow corridors, where 10 defenders hold off 100. And always, Kusi is there, not just behind the front lines, not merely directing from a palace balcony. He is seen in the streets, shouting orders, dragging the wounded from danger, standing where the lines threaten to break. He fights not like a noble forced into war, but like someone who has lived this moment in his mind long before the first blow landed. The people begin to chant his name, not as a prince, but as a force. Kusi, Kusi, over and over, until even the dying whisper it through bloodied teeth. Days pass. The city does not fall. Then, in a twist the Chanka did not predict, a flood of reinforcements arrives. Warriors from surrounding Alis, inspired by the prince's courage, pour into the valley. They bring their slings, their bows, their raw, furious loyalty. And with them, the tide shifts. The Chanka begin to falter, first in one district, then another. Then, as if the city itself exhales, the entire southern wall erupts in counterattack. It isn't organized. It doesn't need to be. Its momentum, pure and unrelenting. The Inca sweep through the enemy like a river carving through dry fields. When the battle is done, the Chanka flee, leaving behind a shattered army and a city that still stands. The Inca rise from the rubble bloodied, limping, and alive. Kusi does not declare himself ruler. He does not speak to the crowd. He simply walks into the Hall of the Sun, sits where his father once did, and begins to issue commands. No one stops him. Word spreads like light over the ridges. Traders begin referring to him not as a prince, but as a living spirit of the city. Local leaders in distant provinces send envoys to Cusco, not to the Sepa Inca, but to Cusiyopanqui. And as temples are rebuilt and warriors return to their terraces, the sense of something new settles over the capital. No proclamation is needed. The city itself has already shifted. And though Viracocha returns weeks later, history will barely notice. The empire has already begun reshaping itself. Not through declaration, but through action. Not through ceremony, but through stone. In time, Cusiyopanqui takes a new name, Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui. It means he who shakes the earth, he who reshapes time. It is not boast, it is not metaphor, it is direction. Because the boy who once traced imaginary roads in the sky now builds them from stone across an empire. The one who studied walls in silence now moves them across valleys. The one who waited for the mountain to speak is now speaking back. And the world listens. By the time Pachacuti calls for the first stones to be placed, Cusco is already alive with change. It doesn't shout its transformation. It hums it. Through courtyards and temples, through the buzz of new plans whispered by architects, and the low chants of priests recalculating sacred alignments. The victory against the Chanka didn't just spare the city, it clarified it. Where others saw survival, Pachacuti saw foundation. Not the end of a war, but the beginning of a blueprint. He does not repair Cusco like a broken vase. He remakes it like a master weaver, pulling every frayed thread into something tighter, stronger, and newly radiant. What once was sacred and scattered will now be sacred and aligned. He doesn't just want to expand Cusco. He wants to reinvent it, not in defiance of the old ways, but as a grand fulfillment of them. The city, already considered the navel of the world, is to be reshaped into a form that pleases both the gods and the eyes. He chooses the puma, the sacred animal of might, intelligence, and divine guardianship. Cusco will become its body, its spine the main avenue, its heart the plaza, its head the towering fortress of Sacsayhuaman to the north. This isn't just city planning. It's cosmological storytelling. The new Cusco is not merely a political center. It is a living symbol, embedded with layers of meaning. And it begins not with words, but with stone. Stonemasons are summoned from across the empire. Veterans of temple construction, terrace builders from the Sacred Valley, artisans from the jungle highlands who know how to make granite flow like water. They gather in the city, hauling their tools, leading caravans of llamas burdened with ropes, levers, and small chisel kits wrapped in wool. Some arrive wide-eyed, others quietly skeptical. The task ahead is monumental, not just in size, but in expectation. Pachacuti does not ask for greatness. He expects it. And so the masons begin. Stones are chosen with care. The granite from Wakoto and the andesite from Sacsayhuaman are selected for their density and polish. They are not soft. They do not split easily, but they hold their shape when shaped. And once they're in place, they stay. Workers begin to chisel block after block, using hammerstones and bronze tools, tracing natural fault lines and coaxing out perfect angles from a material that resists cooperation. Stones are carved and polished until their edges no longer seem made by hand, but by principle itself. The rules are strict. No mortar. The walls must hold through precision alone. Each stone is to be so precisely shaped that not even a blade of grass could pass between it and its neighbor. Every seam must vanish. Every block must carry its weight in both mass and message. They aren't just stacking walls. They are fitting pieces into a larger vision, one that honors the gods through exactness. As the work progresses, the masons find themselves improvising less and measuring more. Pachacuti walks the sites personally, sometimes pausing to run his fingers along a newly set stone, other times pointing out a minor angle, so slight no one else noticed, until he did. At the heart of the project lies the great plaza, the Pada, which Pachacuti orders to be flattened, widened, and enclosed. It becomes the breathing center of Cusco, a vast open square that glows under both sun and moon, flanked by temples, administrative halls, and elite residences. Every ceremony that matters, sun festivals, military parades, royal decrees, will play out here. It's not just a gathering place. It's a theater for empire, where the stage is the city itself, and the actors are kings, priests, and commoners all performing the rituals that hold the Inca world together. Above it all, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman takes shape. What was once a simple lookout post becomes a titanic structure, designed to guard not just Cusco, but its very spirit. The stones here are absurd in size. The largest weigh as much as 100 tons. Moving them across steep slopes requires teams of hundreds, coordinated effort, and techniques whispered only among the most trusted foremen. Wooden sleds groan under the weight. Stone rollers crack under pressure. Workers chant in rhythm as ropes are pulled tight across ramps lined with crushed gravel. Every placement is a victory, and every victory is eternal. And yet, the fortress is not just about defense. Its terraces curve like waves, zigzagging in forms that reflect lightning or jaguar fangs, depending on where one stands. The symbolism is deliberate. Power here is not brute. It is elegant. It is embedded in meaning. Even if no enemy ever tests these walls again, the mere sight of them announces what the Inca have become. The rebuilding touches every corner of Cusco. Water channels are laid beneath the streets, carved to carry clean runoff and redirected away from homes and temples. They don't just function, they sing. The engineers designed them to echo softly, their trickling sounds filtered through stone chambers that produce a quiet hum, like a blessing murmuring beneath the city. Gardens are planted beside these channels, not randomly, but with the help of priest astronomers who dictate what species to place, where, depending on the movement of stars. The entire city becomes a kind of instrument, played by time. Every detail matters. When the temples are rebuilt, Pachacuti orders their walls lined with gold panels, not for luxury, but for light. When the sun enters the sky each morning, its rays hit the gold, bouncing reflections through the courtyards and chambers. To walk through the temple is to walk through sunlight made solid. Visitors gasp when they see it, and the emperor walks it barefoot, not to show humility, but to feel that light underfoot. The stones, the plants, the water, the sun, all of it works together. A single organism, a design that breathes. Cusco becomes not just a capital, but a mold. Other cities begin to copy it, Sacsayhuaman-like walls rising in distant valleys, plazas mirroring the Hawkeye in smaller scale, tambos reflecting the geometry of Cusco's administrative districts. Even local nobles from the outer provinces begin adjusting their estates to mimic Cusco's angles and alignments. The city is no longer just a place. It is a blueprint for everything the Inca wished to be. Years pass, and the construction never truly ends. Temples are added, terraces refined, roads widened. And still, Pachacuti walks the streets in the early hours, sometimes alone, sometimes with a trusted advisor stopping to note where a line might flow better, where a shadow falls wrong, where a stone could be shifted a handspan left for symmetry. This is not obsession. It is devotion. The same devotion he expects from the Empire. And so, beneath the highland sun, in the thin air of the Andes, Cusco rises, stone by stone, terrace by terrace, not as a city that happened, but as a city chosen, built with vision, measured with memory, and held together by more than stone. Once the stones of Cusco are set, once its walls begin to gleam with polished precision, and its terraces rise in clean, deliberate symmetry, Pachacuti turns outward. Not with conquest, yet, but with connection. He does not see mountains as obstacles, rivers as barriers, or forests as traps. He sees them as veins and arteries, waiting to be strung together. His empire, newly claimed and still unsteady, needs more than warriors and temples to endure. It needs roads, not tracks, not paths. Roads, wide, stable, imperial, carved from stone, wound around cliffs, lashed across canyons, and spread like a great woven net across the back of the Andes. So he builds them, not by the mile, but by the thousand. They begin in Cusco, of course, radiating outward like sunbeams from the capital's center. Every direction becomes a Sioux, a quarter of the empire. To the north, roads twist into cloud forests and fog-choked valleys. To the south, they descend into the dry fringes of the Altiplano. To the west, they climb the spine of the mountains until the Pacific wind tastes of salt and copper. And to the east, they dare the lush, green madness of the jungle's edge. Every province, every village of consequence, is soon tethered to the capital, not just by political allegiance, but by footfall. The roads are not all the same. Some are narrow cliffside ribbons, carved into stone faces where a single misstep means a tumble into forever. Others are wide enough for llamas to pass three abreast, ordered with gravel drainage and raised curbstones to fend off the season's floods. Where the ground softens, they're reinforced with logs and layers of crushed rock. Where mountains interrupt, they climb in switchbacks so steep you wonder if even gravity gets tired. They are not ornamental. They are not decorative. They are relentless. Every 20 kilometers or so, a tambo appears. These way stations, scattered like stepping stones across the empire, offer shelter to travelers, rest for runners, storage for supplies, and sometimes even a meal for those lucky enough to carry the right credentials. They are simple buildings, but they are sacred to function. A well-placed tambo can save a campaign. A missing one can end one. The Empire ensures they are never missing. And then there are the runners. Chasquis, as they are called, are the breath of the Empire. Lean, swift, and trained from childhood to cover distances most would call absurd. They don't run for hours. They run in bursts, short, furious segments, passing messages from one to the next like lit torches in the wind. Each runner knows his stretch, like he knows his own heartbeat. He can judge distance by the angle of the sun and pace by the whistle of the wind in the grass. Their messages aren't scrolls or bark or parchment. They are kipu, bundles of knotted cords carried across the shoulders. woven with meaning. Each knot, each color, each spacing tells a story. Tax ledgers, battle plans, weather reports, edicts from Cusco, tallies of maize in a valley granary. It's a literacy of thread, a grammar of tension and twist. One runner might carry a quipu, noting how many baskets of coca leaves were collected this season. Another might carry a warning that a provincial lord has failed to meet tribute expectations. And another might be bearing the very words of Pachacuti himself, condensed into knots and passed across cliffs, faster than any army can travel. The system works because it never stops moving. Even when the empire sleeps, the runners keep running. There is a moment when Pachacuti calls for a test. A message is to be sent from Cusco to the northern frontier, days away by caravan, weeks if the roads are damaged. The runners complete it in under 2 days. Quipu in hand, dusty and exhausted, the final chasqui delivers the knots to the local leader at dawn, just as the sun crests the eastern ridge. The emperor's breath now travels faster than any beast of burden. The empire no longer waits. It responds. Of course, the roads serve more than messengers. They carry armies, supply trains, engineers, priests on pilgrimage. They carry obsidian from the highlands, seashells from the coast, coca from the valleys, and gold from places no one dare speak of too loudly. They even carry information the emperor doesn't ask for. Rumors, songs, jokes. When a road connects you, it also exposes you. But Pachacuti accepts this. An empire must know itself, even when it doesn't like what it hears. To walk these roads is to feel something bigger than yourself. It isn't just the engineering, though that alone is astonishing. It's the rhythm, the subtle awareness that you are not wandering. You are following a line that begins in intention and ends in order. At every tambo, you might find someone carrying a message. At every crossroad, a carved pillar points you toward the sun. Even the bridges, woven from grass and rebuilt annually with ceremony and song, remind you that these roads are not imposed on the land, but offered to it. The empire does not conquer the terrain. It courts it. There is a lesser-known law, simple and absolute, that no one, not even a noble, may disrupt or block the flow of runners. If you hear the whistle of a chasqui, you step aside. If one is approaching, you clear the way. They carry more than words. They carry continuity. A message undelivered might as well be a heart that forgot to beat. Pachacuti eventually orders maps to be made, not based, of course. He wants every valley noted, every tambo indexed, every route evaluated. He is not satisfied until he can close his eyes and trace a message from one edge of the empire to the other, knot by knot, tambo by tambo. He dreams not of domination, but of cohesion. And when he sleeps, he dreams in threads. Historians will one day marvel at the fact that this vast network, some say over 24,000 miles of road in total, was built without wheels, without iron, without horses. But those who walked it, who built it stone by stone, fiber by fiber, never saw it as impossible. They saw it as inevitable, because once Pachacuti envisioned it, the rest was just a matter of footsteps. And so the roads grow, carved from silence, traced with purpose, patrolled by breathless messengers, and shaped by hands that understand what it means to link mountains together, not with force, but with trust. If the roads are the arteries of the empire, and Cusco its beating heart, then the temples are its memory, its bones, its breath, its voice in stone. And among all the temples Pachacuti raises or reshapes, one glows brighter than the rest. Coricancha, the temple of the sun. It already exists before his reign, but not like this. Under Pachacuti, it transforms. From modest grandeur to blinding center. From respected sanctuary to divine engine. He does not simply preserve it. He rewrites it, rewraps it in gold, repositions it within the empire's cosmology, so that no step taken, no prayer whispered, can ignore its gravity. Coricancha sits just east of the Hakaipata, close enough that anyone standing in the great plaza could catch the glint of the sun bouncing from its walls in the morning. That glint isn't metaphor. Pachacuti orders the temple to be lined, literally, inside and out, with hammered gold panels. The walls reflect the dawn light like mirrors softened by age. Gold isn't decoration here. It's theology. For the Inca, the sun isn't a symbol. It's a living deity Inti, and Coricancha is his earthly house. To shine is to worship. And so the walls shine. The inner sanctum of the temple is kept dark, though, because light within must be earned. Only the high priests enter here, barefoot, cloaked, heads bowed low. The floor is polished and warm to the touch. Offerings line the chamber, ceremonial maize shaped from gold, llamas cast in silver, tiny golden children seated in eternal reverence. At the center stands a large golden disc, round and smooth, said to represent the face of Inti. It's not merely for display. During certain times of year, equinoxes, solstices, festivals, the sun shines through carved slits in the temple wall, striking the disc directly, flooding the chamber with light. For a moment, it feels like the sun itself is stepping inside. Outside, the temple's gardens are equally surreal. Everything grows here, and not just in the literal sense. The gardens are filled with golden plants, flowers sculpted with such precision that from a distance they seem alive. Stalks of corn sway gently in the wind, not because they bend, but because they trick the eye with their delicate craftsmanship. Birds perch on golden branches. Lizards sculpted in copper peak from behind real leaves. It's a mingling of the natural and the divine, a place where the line between living and sacred blurs. Children sneak glances through the outer walls, hoping to glimpse a sunbeam bouncing off a leaf that never wilts. But Coricancha isn't the only temple Pachacuti pours himself into. Across the empire, he begins expanding sacred spaces. He sends architects to old shrines in the mountains, instructing them to preserve the wakas, the sacred places, but to frame them more deliberately. Where once a simple stone sat alone on a hillside, now a ceremonial platform is raised around it. Where water once spilled freely from a spring, aqueducts now curve gently to gather it in pools, carved with symbols of fertility and moon cycles. The land doesn't lose its power. It gains focus. There's one shrine in particular that draws attention during his reign. Allentai Tambo. Once a rural outpost, it becomes a place of pilgrimage, its temple terraces rising from the hillside, like the steps of a giant waiting to kneel. Here, the stone blocks are fitted so tightly they almost seem fused, polished to a sheen that reflects starlight. Some believe it's a place where the heavens speak more clearly, where stars rest closer to the earth, and messages travel upward more directly. Others claim the stones here are so perfectly arranged that not even time knows where to start wearing them down. And yet, the most sacred stones of all aren't always the ones carved by hands. Pachacuti is known to walk among the natural wakas, stones shaped by nature, revered by generations before him. Some are said to be the petrified remains of ancestors. Others mark places where lightning struck or where water first touched earth. He doesn't try to remove or enclose them. He builds around them, frames them, honors their place in the sacred geography. In this, he differs from other conquerors. He doesn't erase the past to establish his reign. He threads it into the future, tying old beliefs to new roads, old prayers to new temples, until everything moves together. Kipu records from the time note strange materials being transported to the capital. Seashells, exotic feathers, blue pigments made from rare minerals. These aren't for trade. They're offerings. Objects meant to be placed at the feet of statues, woven into temple wall hangings, or buried beneath newly laid foundations. The empire doesn't just build above ground. It consecrates every layer. Beneath every floor, a buried token, a memory. a request, sometimes even a warning. The priests who serve in these temples are more than ritual caretakers. They're astronomers, healers, record keepers. They interpret the movements of stars from high observatories, marking the seasons and adjusting the agricultural calendar with uncanny accuracy. They treat wounds with herbs grown in sacred gardens. They memorize genealogies, recite origin stories, and perform rites that tie each village to the capital through shared cosmology. The temples are not silent museums. They are humming with function, alive with purpose. One day, a visiting dignitary from a distant province walks through Coricancha with downcast eyes, respectful but skeptical. He kneels at the base of the sun disk, touches the cold, golden edge, and mutters that no gold can truly trap a god. Pachacuti, standing behind him, does not rebuke. He only smiles and says, "The god is not trapped. He is reflected. You see him better because you forget where the light comes from." Historians will later marvel at the scale of sacred construction during Pachacuti's reign. They will debate whether it was belief or politics that drove it, whether the temples served as spiritual engines or instruments of control. But for those who lived then, the distinction didn't matter. The temples were the places where the sky bent closer, where stone spoke in echoes, and where the empire's breath rose like incense. And at the center of it all, in the golden halls of Coricancha, the sun still waits, burning, constant, reflected in walls that remember everything. In the years that follow his greatest building campaigns, Pachacuti walks the terraces of his capital with the quiet bearing of a man who has shaped not just a city, but the very breath and skeleton of an empire. His step is slower, but not hesitant. His gaze remains sharp, still scanning walls, stones, courtyards, and aqueducts, not with the eye of a ruler resting on his laurels, but with the precision of a stonemason checking the final alignments before stepping away from the scaffold. What once was imagined in whispers has taken form in granite and gold, in shadow and flame, in road and ritual. He no longer climbs high towers to survey armies, but instead strolls garden paths designed to align with the solstice light. He pauses to admire the way a terrace spills water in measured rhythm into a carved pool, smiling faintly when it makes the sound he intended. To many, the earth shaker is now more mountain than man, looming, grounded, silent, unmoving, but felt in every echo. The same voice that once cried for the defense of Cusco now speaks only in architecture, in design, in the cadence of how stone fits into stone. His empire is no longer just an expanse of land. It is a shape, a language, a rhythm too large for words. He names his successor, Tupac Inca Yupanqui, with careful calculation, not for blood alone, but for vision. He watches his son ask the right questions, correct the wrong corners, choose the right silences in court. He sees something of himself in the boy, not just ambition, but fluency. A fluency in the empire's deeper code, the way light curves along the plaza at mid-morning, the way the runner's schedules interlock like gears, the way tributaries are coaxed rather than commanded. This is what matters now. And Pachacuti knows it is time to hand forward the thread, not as a break in power, but as a continuation of pattern. He spends long seasons in Patalacta, his chosen estate perched in tiers above the river. The air here is sharper, less burdened by ritual, more honest in its cold. From the stone platforms, he can see ridges undulating like ocean swells, and he often walks barefoot along the terrace edges, testing the craftsmanship by feel. He carries no royal staff here, only memory. The workers respect him not out of fear, but familiarity. He is, after all, the man who asked them where the cracks would form, not the man who cracked the whip. It's said he begins to sketch again, not on vellum or papyrus, but in dust, in river sand, in fingertip traces on morning frost. He speaks to few about it, but rumors travel. A sanctuary high in the clouds, away from battle and ceremony, a kind of final estate not built for war or worship, but for contemplation. A place so hidden that only stars and spirits might know its full geometry. He never names it directly, but many believe the outlines of Machu Picchu began here, whispered from dream to dust. Even in old age, he does not stop measuring. He measures how long a garden wall casts shadow at dusk. He measures the pace at which a priest completes his sun hymn. He measures the way a quipu knot tightens over time, how memory frays, how silence stretches between generations. And he writes nothing down, trusting the empire itself to be the record. His legacy is not bound in scrolls. It is set into the slope of the hill, etched into how bricks breathe when stacked just right. When he dies, he does not vanish. His body is prepared with ceremony, wrapped in the finest textiles woven with sacred dyes, lined with feathers and thread of gold. He is mummified in the tradition of his ancestors, seated upright, placed not underground, but in presence. His Malki, his ancestral essence, continues to attend rituals. It is consulted at court. It is offered chicha and coca during festivals. His advisors speak of him not in past tense, but in pauses, as if he might walk through the door at any moment, adjust a stone out of alignment, and nod with approval. But even the most enduring structure cannot halt the weight of time. Though his empire thrives under his son, the world is already beginning to shift. Beyond the Western Ocean, ships are being carved from foreign timbers, sails stitched for winds no Andean priest has yet charted. Men are gathering with maps drawn from guesswork and desperation, and soon they will arrive bearing steel and plague and prayers that do not belong. The quipu will fall silent. The runners will stop running. The tambos will collapse into wind-blown ruins. But the stones will hold. Centuries later, those stones will be rediscovered by strangers who cannot read them. They will marvel at how they fit. They will run fingers along the seams and wonder why there is no mortar. They will call them mysteries. And in their surprise, they will forget that every mystery was once a plan, a vision, a whispered instruction given under a mountain moon. Even today, no one truly agrees on how Pachacuti did what he did. There are no architectural plans, no letters, no monuments bearing his full likeness. But the truth is visible if you know where to look. It's in the way the light curves through a window in Coricancha on the solstice, in the way a footpath levels for one perfect breath before it climbs again, in the way the walls of Cusco still stand after every tremor, unshaken. They still call him the Earthshaker, not because he broke the ground beneath him, but because he changed the shape of everything that stood upon it. His legacy is not noise. It is balance. It is weight. It is quiet where quiet should be, and strength where no one else thought to put it. And yet, even with all his roads in temples and plazas, some paths remain beyond reach. There are stories of trails that slip between valleys no map remembers. Roads that lead not to cities, but to silence. Trails that vanish into green canopies and never return. One in particular remains the most whispered. A trail that bends through cloud forest, climbs where no horses dare, and ends at a place so hidden that even the stars forget its name. They say it leads to Vilcabamba, the last city of the Inca, and that's where we're going next. The first thing you notice is how the world becomes quiet in strange ways. Not silent, never truly silent, but dampened, like the mountains have pulled a thick green quilt over everything and whispered to the trees to hush. The usual sounds of life, the clatter of hooves, the voices of masons, the whistle of wind between terraces, fade behind moss and fog. The road you've been following is still here, technically, but it doesn't look like the royal highways of the highlands. It's narrower now, less proud, hunched beneath dripping branches and creeping vines. The once clear path has been half swallowed by roots, leaf litter, and thyme. You're no longer walking across an empire. You're walking into what's left of it. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The quipus you studied, those few that remain, tangled with mystery and age, hinted at a trail. a forgotten branch of the Royal Highway. Nothing grand, nothing celebrated. A footnote. But the fragments spoke clearly enough if you listened. A sudden disappearance from supply lists. A runner's note about an unscheduled detour. A ceremonial record that mentioned a shrine, lost in cloud and sound. There were threads in the cords, threads leading east, threads no one wanted to tug too hard. Now you're here, and the forest doesn't greet you. It absorbs you. The cloud forest isn't jungle in the way foreigners imagine it. It doesn't roar or pulse with danger. It murmurs. It glows faintly in the mist, its green hues dulled by dew and filtered light. Everything is slick. The trees rise slender and high, wearing cloaks of velvet moss. Vines hang low like sleeping serpents. The ground feels spongy underfoot, a mulch of generations. Ferns brush your knees, and the air tastes like wet stone and lichen. There's no trail marker, but there are hints. Stones that still show the signature polish of a chisel, a channel of water that curves too perfectly to be coincidence, and an odd rhythm in how the trees grow. A rhythm that follows you. You tread carefully. The road, or what's left of it, still breathes beneath the decay. Beneath your boots, the outlines of ancient paving stones peek through the dirt. Not many, not clear, but just enough to say, yes, someone came this way, and they meant to return. You pass a short wall, collapsed beneath the weight of a strangler fig. On its face, still half visible through the moss, is a carved spiral. It's unclear whether it's symbolic or decorative, but it catches the light in a way that makes you pause. You reach out, and the stone is warm. Not from the sun, it hasn't touched this forest in hours, but from something else. Something settled deep. Then come the sounds. Not loud, not urgent, just rustles. Footsteps that don't belong to animals. Echoes without direction. The forest is a master of ventriloquism. It throws sound where it shouldn't be. Sometimes the birdsong is behind you when it should be above. Sometimes the branches creak when nothing moves. It's disorienting in a way you can't explain. You look over your shoulder more often, but not from fear, at least not entirely. It feels like the forest is watching, but not unkindly, just attentively. You climb a slope where the trees briefly open, revealing a wide stone platform, cracked and layered with fallen leaves. In its center stands a large stone, tall, weathered, and dark with age. You brush the surface with your sleeve and find shallow carvings, barely there. A face, perhaps, or a sunburst. It's too eroded to tell. Someone placed it here long ago, not as a milestone, but as a witness, a watcher. You rest beside it for a time, and the fog curls around the edges of the clearing like smoke from an unseen fire. The moment feels suspended, a pause in the forest's breathing. When you move on, the light has shifted. Not brighter, not darker, just grayer. It's harder to tell where the sky is. The trees overhead form a canopy so thick that even the clouds feel lost. You begin to find things that shouldn't be here. A line of stones forming a perfect curve across a hill. A staircase climbing to nowhere. A stretch of shallow wall too symmetrical to be random. None of it leads anywhere obvious. But it all leads forward. That's what you keep feeling. That you're being led. Not to a city, not yet. But toward a shape the Empire once tried to hide in the folds of the world. Then you stumble upon a water channel. Carved into stone. Barely a hand's width across, but still flowing. The water trickles past your fingers, cold and clean. Someone built this. To guide water, this delicately requires precision, not accident. You kneel beside it, tracing its line with your eyes as it disappears into the trees. That means someone once lived here, not just passed through. This wasn't a military road. It was something gentler, something sacred. And as if in response to that thought, the forest opens again. A rise of earth gives way to a crumbling terrace. Just one, overgrown, collapsing inward, but still unmistakable. A terrace like the ones near Cusco, a piece of a garden. You climb to it and find a platform behind it, flat, circular, carved with a faint groove around the edge. An altar? A sundial? A place to pray? Or to wait? You sit there for a while, listening. The birds are quiet now. The trees sway, but nothing rustles. The entire forest feels like it's holding its breath. You don't know if you're trespassing or being welcomed. Either way, you whisper a word of thanks. And only after you say it aloud do you notice the trail again, narrow, sloping, and just visible through the hanging moss. You rise, step back into the green corridor, and move forward slowly. You don't know where it ends, but you are certain now that this trail was never meant for just any traveler. It was meant for someone willing to notice the whispers. And you're listening. It starts with a single step that feels just a little too level beneath your boot. One stone, half buried in the earth, shaped not by accident, but by intent. It isn't part of a staircase. It isn't part of a wall. It's just there, sitting alone, like a dropped coin in the middle of an unmarked path. You brush the moss away and run your fingers across its face. The edges are worn, but unmistakably straight. Carved, placed, not a boulder, a building block. And once you've seen one, the others start to appear. They're never clustered, never stacked, just scattered like clues. A flat-topped slab here, a beveled edge poking out from under a fern. Some are askew, tilted by years of rain and root, while others remain so precisely aligned with the slope of the land that you wonder if the mountain itself has decided to preserve their dignity. You walk carefully, adjusting your pace, eyes sweeping the ground as if reading a story told in fragments. The deeper you go, the more the forest starts to feel layered. Like you're not just moving forward, you're peeling something back. Soon you begin to see what may have once been steps. Not modern stairs, but shallow risers cut into rock, now warped by centuries of pressure and moss. They don't lead anywhere obvious. In fact, the trail winds in directions that seem deliberately inefficient. It doubles back around ridges. It cuts across streams instead of following them. It rises sharply where an easier slope lies nearby. But something about that stubbornness tells you it was important. It wasn't the quickest way, but maybe it was the correct one. Occasionally, the forest seems to resist. A branch will drop just ahead of you. A tree leans slightly into the trail as if trying to nudge you back. And yet, with every hesitation, the stones answer. A lintel buried in ivy. A wall so low and straight could only be man-made. Once, you stop dead at the sight of a rounded boulder set upright, capped with a stone that balances perfectly on its tip. It's not a sculpture. It's not even decorative, but it's too intentional to be anything else. A marker, a message, or maybe just a reminder that the road you're on didn't vanish. It was hidden. You pause more often now, listening not just for sound, but for presence. The air is thicker here, not with danger, but with memory. You feel it in the way the wind avoids certain corners of the trail, how the birdsong skips when you reach what must have once been a rest station or ceremonial turn. You wonder how many feet passed this way before you. Not soldiers, not farmers. Couriers, perhaps. Messengers who carried not messages of war, but quiet instructions. Pilgrims, priests, healers. People who move not for conquest, but for continuity. Then you stumble across the first curve. Not a natural bend in the trail, but a perfect arc of stones, 8 in a row, half buried, each one flat and evenly spaced, forming the outline of a structure that no longer stands. You kneel beside it, and as you brush away the leaves, you can almost see the shape of it in your mind. A platform, perhaps, or a gathering place. Maybe a small ashnu, one of the elevated thrones used for rituals observation, or declarations. Whatever it was, it meant something. You stay there longer than expected, feeling the stones with both hands, trying to memorize their placement. You want to carry the shape with you, like a secret. Farther ahead, the trail grows narrower and more treacherous. The forest thickens. Vines snag your cloak. You use your hands more often now, pulling yourself up small inclines or bracing against branches as you descend uneven ridges. The path is no longer visible in the usual way, but your body still follows it, like it remembers something your eyes don't. The placement of your feet becomes instinctual. You begin to anticipate where the next stone might be, and more often than not, you're right. And then you find the stairs. They're not dramatic, not the kind you'd photograph, but they're real. 6 in a row, chiseled into the slope, set with care, flanked by low retaining stones that have been swallowed by tree roots. You stop at the top step, and for a moment, the forest tilts in your perception. You're no longer wandering. You're standing in a place that had purpose. These steps were climbed with intention. People once stood here and looked out, just as you are now, though the view is cloaked in fog and fern. Off to the side, you find what may have once been a tambo, or something like it. A flat area, half sheltered by a rocky overhang, with a scattering of stones that look too angular for nature. A carved channel runs alongside it, dry now, but clearly meant to guide water. You sit here for a while, taking in the quiet. You don't light a fire. You don't need to. The humidity wraps you like a blanket, and the stones radiate a gentle warmth from the sun they barely saw during the day. As twilight settles, fireflies rise from the undergrowth, blinking in soft, uneven rhythm. You watch them float through the ruins of something that refuses to be called ruins. Nothing here is truly gone. It's just covered, paused, waiting. You wonder if the stones would speak, given the right question. But you don't ask. You simply listen. And beneath the drone of insects and the call of a distant bird, you think you hear something else. Not words, not voices, just the faint, rhythmic tap of feet on stone, like echoes that haven't yet admitted they're echoes. A reminder that long ago, someone walked this same path. Not by mistake, but by necessity. The trail is still ahead. More stones to find, more shapes to recognize. You feel the pull now, not just to discover, but to remember. Because some roads aren't built to be seen, they're built to be followed. It begins with a silence that doesn't feel entirely natural. Not an absence of sound, there's still the drip of water from leaves, the occasional call of a bird, the faint buzz of a fly, but rather a hush that feels deliberate. It's like the forest around you has decided to press a finger to its own lips. The air feels thicker, not in temperature or weight, but in expectation. You're not sure when the feeling started. It crept in somewhere between the scattered shrine stones and a last glimpse of carved stairwork, just as the trail stopped behaving like a trail and started behaving like a question. You walk slower now, not because you're tired, though your legs remind you that you should be, but because the path no longer asks for speed. It doesn't guide, it lingers. The turns feel uncertain, as if they're watching to see whether you'll follow without being told. You keep expecting the road to end, or at least pause for breath, but it doesn't. It merely dissolves and reforms, like a shadow caught in fog. One moment the ground underfoot is plain dirt. The next, the toe of your boot hits a stone too flat to be natural, too square to be chance. It's as if the road is testing you. If you stop believing in it, it might vanish entirely. You've left behind all signs of empire. No tambos, no runners, no fresh prints or signs of tribute caravans. Whatever road this is, it isn't patrolled, maintained, or even spoken of. And yet you follow it, not for reward or recognition, but because something about it feels unfinished. As if its builders were interrupted mid-thought, and you've stumbled into a sentence that was never completed. Here and there, the road still hints at its former self. A carved groove meant to catch rainwater. A collapsed stair whose lower steps are still perfectly even. A stone retaining wall, half buried and bowed outward by the pressure of centuries of shifting soil. But there's no rhythm to these signs anymore. No pattern. It's like flipping through the final pages of a book that was never meant to end. You begin to wonder, was this road ever finished? Or was it a path not to somewhere, but away from something? The question lingers as you duck beneath a tangle of vines and climb a steep incline that seems to exist for no reason. At the top, there's no view, just a dense bank of mist that curls low around your knees and spreads through the trees like smoke from a forgotten campfire. You pause, catching your breath, and turn in a slow circle. There's nothing here. And that, somehow, feels important. You press onward, and the forest closes again. The trees grow tighter, their branches dipping lower as if eavesdropping. You sidestep moss-covered boulders that resemble sleeping creatures. You cross a shallow gully on a slick log that may have once been a beam, and at its far side, you find something strange. A row of 5 stones, each the size of your chest, placed in a curve. Not a wall, not a border, just present, waiting. The stones have no carvings, no symbols, but you feel them watching. Not maliciously, just patiently, like they were left behind to greet whoever might come next. And then, something new. The trail, such as it is, drops steeply into a hollow, and at its bottom sits a small platform of flat stone. You nearly miss it. The edges are cracked, overgrown with ferns and vines, but the surface has been cleared recently. Not entirely, just enough to suggest that someone somewhere has passed this way not long ago. You crouch, run your fingers across the cold, smooth surface. There are faint grooves, maybe for water drainage, maybe for ceremonial use. Or maybe they're just scars from centuries of pressure. But something about the neatness of it all feels intentional. This place is waiting. For what? You can't tell. You sit on the edge of the platform for a while, not resting, contemplating. The forest has grown still again. That same heavy hush wrapping itself around your shoulders. You're no longer waiting for the road to show you something. You're simply allowing it to exist. And then it strikes you. This road was never meant to lead to Vilcabamba. Not in the obvious sense. Not in a way that could be mapped. This isn't a road to a city. It's a road to a memory. The Inca, for all their power, didn't build only for movement. They built for meaning. They understood that sometimes, to preserve something, you didn't protect it with walls. You scattered it across the land, in pieces too small to draw attention, but too sacred to forget. This trail, this meandering path through the cloud forest, is one of those pieces. Not a secret, not exactly, but a kind of prayer. One that only reveals itself to those who keep walking long after logic says to stop. You rise again, legs sore but steady, and keep moving. The stones appear less frequently now, but when they do, they feel more profound. A single carved step in the side of a slope. A notch in a tree that shouldn't be there. A curve in the trail that mirrors the shape of the sun's arc across the solstice sky. None of these things are provable, but they feel real. Eventually, you crest a small ridge, and there, in the mist, you see nothing. And it's perfect, because now you understand. This road doesn't end. It was never supposed to. It loops through time, memory, belief. Its goal is not to bring you to a destination, but to leave you changed by the journey. To remind you that not all cities need walls, and not all stories need endings. That some things are sacred precisely because they remain unfinished. You stand quietly, mist coiling around your ankles. Somewhere behind you, the forest has already begun to reclaim your footprints. Somewhere ahead, the trail may disappear entirely. But you don't need it to be visible anymore. Because now you know, the road exists in motion, and it only belongs to those willing to keep going. You don't see it at first. That's how it survives. There's no triumphant entrance to greet you, no golden doorway or ceremonial gate. There are no banners, no guards, no lines of stones announcing. Here lies the city you were looking for. The forest has learned to keep secrets, and this one it guards fiercely. All you catch at first are subtle things, angles that look too deliberate, shadows that shouldn't be there. A wall, barely visible through the vines, curves with the kind of precision that nature doesn't bother with. It's as though the mist itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to realize what you've stumbled into. You step forward, pushing past ferns heavy with rainwater, and the shape becomes clearer. Stones. Not the scattered stones of an abandoned shrine, but walls, real walls, with corners and niches, still standing after centuries of neglect. You blink and for a moment, it's as if the fog parts just enough to reveal an outline. A plaza, small but unmistakable, with terraces stepping downward like ribs on a spine. You found it, or perhaps it has found you. Vilcabamba. Not the shining city of gold that the conquistadors imagined, but something far more haunting. A place of retreat, of resilience, of quiet defiance. As you enter, the first thing you notice is the silence. Not the emptiness of a ruin, but the kind of silence that feels alive. The kind that listens. The path narrows between two terrace walls that lean slightly inward as though greeting you. The stones are slick with moss, but still solid underfoot. You pause to press your hand against one, and it's cold, colder than the air around it, like it's been holding its breath for centuries. The plaza ahead is small and uneven, with gaps where stones have shifted under the pressure of roots and time. Yet its layout is unmistakable. This was once a place of gathering, a space for voices and footsteps, for runners delivering messages and leaders giving orders that carried the weight of an empire. Now it's empty, but not dead. The walls, though scarred, still hold their shape with the kind of precision that defines Inca masonry. No mortar, just perfectly cut stones locked together like puzzle pieces. You crouch to examine them and wonder about the hands that shaped them. Were they tired? Were they afraid? Did they know they were building not for the future, but for the last breath of something that could not last forever? You wander the site slowly, tracing each terrace, each narrow stairway. Some steps lead nowhere now, broken by roots or ending abruptly in collapsed earth. Others still hold, carrying you upward toward a small platform that overlooks the hollow below. From here, you can see the bones of the place. The terraces step down the hillside in graceful arcs. A water channel, impossibly narrow and still flowing, cuts across the center like a silver thread. It's not grand, but it's perfect in its own quiet way. It's impossible not to imagine who lived here. You picture a small group of Inca loyalists, warriors, priests, maybe even the last emperor himself, choosing this remote, mist-shrouded refuge to escape the relentless push of the Spanish. Here, far from the main roads, they would have had time. Time to plan, to pray, to breathe, but also time to grieve, to watch their empire slip away, piece by piece, until even Cusco was a memory too heavy to carry. This wasn't just a stronghold, it was a sanctuary, a place where the old ways could live a little longer, even if only in whispers. You step into one of the few surviving structures. It's small, no larger than a modern living room, but its walls rise with stubborn strength. The inside is cool and damp, smelling of earth and time. A niche in the back wall, once used for sacred offerings, is still intact. You kneel for a moment, not out of ritual, but out of respect. The silence feels like it's watching. Farther on, you find what might have been a council room. The walls are thicker here, with several small alcoves carved into the stone. Perhaps these were for holding records, or quipus, or ceremonial vessels. You run your fingers over the stone and feel its smoothness. Time has polished it, but it's still as solid as the day it was placed. The terraces outside reveal more clues. They're narrow, built for cultivation, not grandeur. Here they grew maize, coca, and potatoes, sustaining the people who made their final stand. These terraces aren't just functional, they're defiant. Even in hiding, the Inca built with precision, with care, with the belief that order and beauty were one and the same. As you move toward the highest point of the site, you find the remains of what must have been a lookout. The view is almost entirely fog, but on the rare occasions the mist shifts, you glimpse the rolling green hills beyond, stretching endlessly. The sense of isolation is overwhelming. You can see why they chose this place. No army would stumble upon it. No casual traveler would find it by accident. This was not just a stronghold. It was an erasure, a deliberate choice to vanish. You sit at the edge of the platform, legs dangling, and try to imagine the conversations that took place here. Did they talk of revenge, of returning to Cusco? Or did they talk of the old gods, of the mountains and rivers, of the ancestors who had shaped the empire long before Spain had a name? The silence offers no answers, but it feels like it remembers. As twilight falls, the fog thickens again, swallowing the terraces one by one until only the stones nearest you remain visible. The air cools and the forest's hum rises, soft chirps, distant rustles, the sigh of wind in the trees. You realize it's time to go, but leaving feels like tearing yourself away from a story that isn't finished. You walk back through the plaza slowly, trailing your fingers along the walls as if memorizing them by touch. You pause one last time at the gate-like narrowing where you first entered. You turn, half expecting to see someone standing there, a shadow of an emperor, a warrior, a priest. But the fog is empty. Still, you know the city isn't gone. Not really. It waits here, hidden, breathing quietly in its own way, long after the world above has forgotten. You take one last look at the terraces, at the walls that refuse to fall, and then you step back into the forest. The trail welcomes you again, faint but certain. Somewhere ahead, the forest will swallow the road once more. But you know now that some roads never truly end. By the time you return to the edge of Vilcabamba, dawn has crept through the forest like a whisper instead of a shout. There's no golden fanfare, no dramatic sunbeams parting the clouds. Just a pale shift in the mist, a slow warming of the light, and the quiet realization that the outlines of the world have softened into visibility again. You step into the clearing cautiously, as if the stones themselves might still be asleep, not yet ready to remember the weight of history. But they are. They always are. The terraces shine faintly with dew, each step catching a hint of morning light like a mirror left out in the open. You walk slowly now, not because your legs are sore, which they are, but because it feels wrong to hurry. You're not in a city. You're in a memory. And memories demand a kind of gentleness. You pass a low wall where moss has grown thick enough to bury the top layer of stones. At the base, you catch movement, slow, deliberate, careful. A spider the size of your thumbnail is spinning a web from one broken niche to the next. Its thread glistens, impossibly thin and undeniably perfect, catching just enough light to look like silver. You stop to watch, not because you're fascinated by spiders, though in this moment, you kind of are, but because it feels symbolic. A single creature weaving connections across a ruined empire. Quiet, determined, unnoticed. The spider works patiently. No rush, no panic. You get the feeling it's been building webs here for generations. You step around it, careful not to disturb the delicate lines, and follow a shallow path through the central plaza again. The stones beneath your feet are uneven, and now you start noticing things you didn't see before. A niche with a tiny, carved symbol worn almost flat by centuries of rain. A groove in the stone that might have been a drainage line, or a ceremonial channel, or just a natural fault embraced by the builders. You pause at the basin again, the one you saw the day before. It's still catching water, one drop at a time, from a cracked spout above. You wonder if it's ever gone dry. The sun begins to burn off the mist, and as it does, the city reveals itself slowly, not like a map, not all at once, more like a secret being told in pieces. Each corner turned reveals one more hint, one more layer. You see a low stairway, nearly swallowed by earth, that leads to a tiny square structure partially collapsed. Inside is nothing, no artifacts, no bones, no gold, but it feels purposeful, as though someone once prayed there, or slept, or simply waited. You take a seat on one of the long, low benches that line the plaza. They're not decorative. They're the kind of benches made for listening, for conversations, for waiting out the uncertainty of empire while still keeping your dignity intact. You sit, and the stone is cold, but not unwelcoming. The silence around you stretches, not empty, but full of questions. What did they talk about here? Did they plan the future? Mourn the past? Did they laugh sometimes, when the nights were long and the food was warm enough? Historians still debate what exactly Vilcabamba was. Some say it was the final capital of the Inca. Others believe it was more of a spiritual redoubt, a sacred waypoint designed for rituals and retreat. No one knows for certain. And in a way, that uncertainty has become part of the place's identity. Vilcabamba doesn't need to be pinned down. It was, and that's enough. You rise and begin exploring the outer edges of the site. These buildings are more fragmented, more humble. Housing, maybe. Storage. Places for sleep and silence. The walls are lower, and the stones less polished, but still purposeful. You find a room where light filters in through a collapsed ceiling, illuminating a floor worn smooth in the center. Perhaps where people gathered, knelt, danced. The idea of dance here surprises you. It's easy to imagine Vilcabamba as a place of sorrow. But sorrow doesn't cancel celebration. It deepens it. You crouch near a corner and run your fingers along a groove in the floor. It feels like a channel, but there's no sign of water. Just dust and the occasional scurry of some small insect. Still, it feels like it belonged to something living. You wonder who carved it, and why, and whether they ever knew their marks would outlast them by centuries. The light continues to grow. The sun isn't high, but it's strong enough now to cast shadows across the stones. Long, slanting lines that turn every terrace into a layered painting. The spider is still at work. And in the stillness, you begin to realize something else. Vilcabamba isn't hidden anymore. It isn't protected by its remoteness or its mystery. Not really. It's protected by silence, by the quiet respect of those who find it and choose to listen instead of shouting. This is not a place of answers. It's a place of invitations. To walk slowly, to wonder, to feel. You sit again on a different wall this time and simply breathe. The forest has resumed its rhythm. Birds call out to each other in the canopy. Leaves rustle with movement. Something scampers behind the terraces. A lizard, maybe, or a ghost. But if it's a ghost, it isn't interested in you. It's seen your kind before. Eventually, you stand, not because you're done, but because you've heard enough for now. The walls are still talking. You're just choosing to let them continue without you. You take one last slow walk through the center of the site, brushing your hand along the stones, whispering something under your breath that isn't quite a prayer. Maybe it's a thank you. Maybe it's a promise. Either way, the walls stay silent, but they listen. It doesn't vanish with fire. Not with a scream, or a sword, or the thud of Spanish boots on sacred ground. No grand finale. No blood-soaked farewell. Instead, Vilcabamba simply fades. There's something unsettling about a city that doesn't end in ruin, but in silence. You stand on the final terrace at the edge of the site, the mist just beginning to peel back, and you strain your ears, almost expecting to hear the last conversation that took place here. Maybe it was a whispered prayer. Maybe a tired laugh between two guards. Or maybe it wasn't dramatic at all. Maybe the last words ever spoken in this place were something as mundane as "I'll be right back." And no one ever was. You walk slowly, tracing the outer curve of the final terrace. It's overgrown here. Roots and ferns stretch across the stonework like lazy fingers. Some of the walls are slouched under the weight of time, but most still stand. Not proudly, not defiantly, just still, as if they're waiting for something. Or someone. But the air carries no footsteps. Only the rustle of highland wind, moving through the trees like a long sigh. Historians have debated for centuries what truly became of this place. Some claim the Spanish eventually discovered it, sacked it, and left it to rot. Others argue it was abandoned gradually, as food grew scarce or leadership grew uncertain. A few even suggest the people of Vilcabamba simply walked away, quietly, intentionally, not as a defeat, but as a ritual. A way to release the city before it was taken. No record survived to tell us the truth. Not one single written word from the Inca themselves. All we have are the stones and the gaps between them. You crouch beside a stairway, half buried by dirt, and run your hand along a groove carved into the wall beside it. It's shallow, thin, barely visible in the morning light, but unmistakably deliberate. It follows the rise of the steps like a finger tracing a path skyward. Was it ceremonial? Decorative? Functional? Or maybe it meant nothing at all. Just a bored mason testing his tools one quiet afternoon. The fact that we don't know makes it feel all the more important. Sometimes what remains unsaid lasts the longest. And that's the thing about Vilcabamba. It leaves questions. So many questions. Why here, in this tangled forest ridge so far from the Empire's heart? Why build so carefully in a place so few were ever meant to see? Why carry the knowledge of empire, of stonecraft and sun temples, to a place that was never meant to grow? You keep walking, back through the plaza now, your footsteps softer than before. You begin to notice things that don't quite fit. A stair that leads nowhere. A wall that curves toward a slope and then stops abruptly, like a sentence left hanging. A perfect corner. With no room attached. None of it feels accidental. And yet, no one can explain it. Some archaeologists believe these are signs of a city unfinished, construction interrupted by war or famine. Others think it's the opposite, that these fragments are remnants of something intentionally dismantled. Dismantling, after all, was an Inca ritual act. You didn't simply abandon sacred places. You unmade them, stone by stone, to release their spirit before departure. That idea stays with you as you pause by the final water channel. It still runs faint and slow, down into a collection basin carved into the rock. It shouldn't still be working, but it is. A trickle of water, clear and cold, marks time in droplets. Plip, 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 like a clock with no hands, no numbers. Just the rhythm of something ancient still moving forward, even as everything else has stopped. You sit nearby on a low bench. The forest around you hums softly, birdsong, leaves brushing against each other, the distant whisper of wind across stone. You imagine what this city looked like in its final days. The fields going untended, the fires burning lower each night, the messages growing shorter, more desperate. And then, one day, nothing. Just people slipping quietly between the trees, carrying only what they could, leaving no note behind. There are rumors, of course. There always are. Some say a final royal archive was buried beneath the plaza, filled with kipis and sacred objects. Others believe the last priests disappeared into the jungle with the bones of emperors, guarding them still. There are tales of hidden messages encoded in the layout of the terraces, in the lines of water and shadow that only make sense on solstice mornings. But no one has proven anything. And maybe that's the point. Vilcabamba was not built to be found. It was built to be remembered by those who already knew. You rise again and walk to the northernmost edge of the site. From here, you can see where the trail you arrived on vanishes back into the forest. The stones are uneven. The foliage is thick, but the path is still there. You turn to take one last look. The city doesn't offer you anything in return. No sign, no voice in the leaves, no secret suddenly made clear. Just a collection of perfect stones, still holding the shape of an empire's final breath. Still waiting, still watching. And you realize something important. Vilcabamba didn't fail. It fulfilled its purpose. It gave the last heirs of the Inca one final chance to be Inca, to speak their language, to observe their rituals, to watch the sun rise over walls they'd built with their own hands. And when it was time to go, they went, not broken, not conquered, just finished. You take a long breath, and the cool mountain air fills your chest. It tastes of moss and stone and something else, something you can't name. Maybe it's memory, or maybe it's the last echo of a road that no longer leads anywhere, but still refuses to vanish completely. And now, it's time for you to leave too, but not to descend, not just yet, because while the story of Vilcabamba has ended, another still waits at the height of Inca glory. Far from jungle strongholds and fading memories, we step now into a world of wide stone streets, golden walls, and endless ceremony. You're not a refugee anymore. You're a noble in the heart of Cusco, and your day is just beginning. You wake slowly, not because you're tired, but because you can. There is no urgency here, not for someone of your status. The first thing you notice is the scent of the room. A mix of cool stone, burning Palo Santo, and the faint tongue of freshly crushed coca leaves laid out in a small dish near your bed. You've grown used to these details, but they still ground you in the life you've inherited. A life not of toil, but of rituals, expectations, and silent surveillance. Beyond the walls, Cusco is already stirring. You don't need to see it to know. The pulse of the city beats under the floor. Subtle at first. The soft shuffle of bare feet sweeping stone paths. The flap of market stall cloths being tied back. The rhythm of drums in the plaza, distant but steady, marking the start of something sacred. You sit up and stretch beneath the soft, layered blanket of woven alpaca wool. It's dyed in the rich burgundy shade that only nobles and the royal family are permitted to wear. The color extracted from cochineal insects gathered in the valleys. The fabric is so fine it doesn't itch, just warms. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and your feet meet polished stone. It's cool to the touch but dry. Someone has already swept and wiped the chamber before you woke. They always do. Your chamber, one of many in the noble quarter of the city's core, is not ostentatious. The Inca do not favor extravagance in the way some other empires do. Gold is sacred, yes, but it is not used for indulgence. The walls around you are perfectly aligned, fitted with such exact precision that not even a hair can slide between the stones. There's no decoration. The craftsmanship itself is the art. You run your palm across one wall as you stand, feeling its subtle curve, a sign you're in a room of some importance. Only the finest builders shape walls this way. You are not common. The room whispers that to you without a single word. A servant enters silently. She's young, quick-footed, and already carrying a bowl of warm water for washing. Another follows behind, arms full of finely woven garments, and a belt trimmed with shell and silver. They do not speak unless spoken to. You nod once, acknowledging their presence. It's enough. While they work, laying out your clothes, adjusting the cushions, placing a small bowl of dried fruit and maize cakes on a low table, you glance through the high window slit. The sky is streaked with soft gold and pale lavender. The sun hasn't yet cleared the eastern ridge, but the light is climbing fast. You hear the rustle of wind through high cypress trees, and the distant calls of men unloading llamas in the lower market. Somewhere far off, a conch shell is blown, a deep spiraling sound that tells you it's the 6th hour. You take the cup of warm chicha when it's offered and sip slowly. The maize drink is sour, thick, and earthy, familiar, grounding. Your garments this morning are ceremonial. A dark tunic with geometric embroidery along the hem, matched with a patterned cloak fastened by a silver clasp shaped like a stylized sun. You've worn more lavish pieces, but today's clothing is for respect, not opulence. Inti Raymi is only a few days away, and the city is building towards something larger. As you step outside your chamber into the open-air hallway, the scent of burning wood hits you first, aromatic smoke from the temple's morning offerings. It trails skyward in slender curls from a brazier near the courtyard. A priest in white cotton robes is already moving among the stones, scattering flower petals and murmuring prayers you don't quite catch. The smell of the petals, marigold and sweet muna, mingles with the smoke, creating something strangely soothing. The palace complex is already alive. Officials in bright tunics walk slowly along the carved stone corridors, heads slightly bowed in quiet discussion. A line of young acolytes carrying jugs of water from the sacred spring file past you without looking up. And behind them, 2 older noblewomen are exchanging a bundle of dyed cloth and what appears to be a quipu, its cords long, color-coded, and threaded with wooden beads. Messages carried by knots, conversations encoded in texture. You follow the path toward the upper terrace and feel the faint tremor of Cusco awakening beneath your sandals. The steps here are wide and shallow, polished by hundreds of years of noble feet. As you climb, you feel the sun finally cresting the mountains behind you. It touches the rooftops first, glinting off gilded tiles, casting long shadows from the pillars, and then warms the stone beneath your feet. The moment the light hits your shoulders, a murmur ripples through the terrace. Priests begin a chant in low harmony, marking the hour with a prayer of greeting to Inti, the sun god. You pause and turn toward the light, offering a short bow, not dramatic, but sincere. Everyone does, even the emperor. The view from here stretches across the whole city. Below, the streets wind like veins through the body of the puma-shaped capital. From this height, you can trace the gentle curves of the sacred city plan. The tail in the southeast, the belly where the plaza lies, the jagged teeth of Sacsayhuaman guarding the head. It isn't just clever design, it's devotion in stone. Every wall, every canal, every terrace tells a story, one that you were born into. And with that birthright comes responsibility. Being a noble in Cusco is not a vacation. It's a role, a performance. You must speak carefully, dress properly, walk with measured calm. Your life is both a privilege and a display. The Empire is watching, even when it doesn't seem to be. Still, there are soft moments, like this one. You linger for a while, watching the vendors set up their stalls along the market street. Bright fabrics are spread out. Baskets of dried peppers and quinoa begin to appear. A boy leads a trio of llamas draped in colorful cords through the far gate. From somewhere, music begins, flutes again, this time joined by a small hand drum, steady and grounding. A palace servant finds you with a gentle word and reminds you that you're expected soon in the temple court. You nod and follow, your sandals whispering against the stone. The day has begun. There will be duties, rituals, offerings. But for this moment, as the city stretches into the sun and the flutes rise higher over Cusco's rooftops, you carry yourself with the quiet weight of legacy. And beneath it all, the pulse of the Empire beats in time with your own. Getting dressed in Cusco isn't just about clothing. It's about declaring who you are to everyone who lays eyes on you. From the farmers glimpsing you from the terraces to the priests watching from the temple steps. Every fold, every thread, every pattern carries a message. And you, as a noble, must wear that message with dignity. Not arrogance, dignity, because these are not simply fine clothes. These are sacred symbols. And in the heart of the Inca Empire, appearances are not vanity, they are ceremony. You begin in the dressing chamber, a square room with high walls, soft light, and the steady hum of motion. Two attendants wait silently near the racks, each one draped in textiles of lesser, but still respectable quality. You're not expected to speak much here. The act of dressing is guided by ritual. Your presence is enough. They begin by removing your night tunic, folding it carefully into a cloth bundle to be washed, dried in the sun, and reused later by someone of lower status, never discarded. Waste is not part of the Inca vocabulary. The first garment you put on is the unku, the basic noble tunic. But basic doesn't mean plain. This one is woven from baby alpaca wool and dyed deep crimson, the color of blood and divine lineage. The neckline is a subtle V, bordered by a pattern of stepped diamonds that echo the sacred shape of the Andes. The feel of the fabric is something you can't quite describe. It's soft, yes, but strong, like wearing something alive, something with memory. That's not far from the truth. The finest garments in the empire are made by a class, the chosen women, cloistered weavers trained from childhood in the art of divine threadwork. They spin not just wool, but duty into every thread. Some say you can feel their prayers woven into the seams. And in moments like this, you believe it. Next comes the wera, your belt. It's no simple sash. It's thick and wide, made of layers of corded wool dyed in alternating bands of indigo and ochre. The ends are tipped in bronze beads that jingle softly when tied, subtle music to mark your presence. The belt isn't just decorative. It holds the tunic in place and marks your social tier. The complexity of the weave alone tells any observer that you are not a merchant, or a craftsman, or even a low-level administrator. You are higher. You belong to the bloodline of the Earth's backbone. Sandals come next, leather-soled, with braided toe straps, dyed a dusky purple, fastened around your ankles with thin copper cords. They're practical, yes, but the materials speak. These are not the woven grass sandals of the Chosky runners, or the barefoot priests of the countryside temples. These are noble sandals, meant for walking polished stone and stepping deliberately through ceremonies that stretch from sunrise to moonrise. And then the cloak, the likla. Today's is special. It was prepared weeks in advance for your role in the Inti Raymi ceremony. Its weave is denser than usual, almost weighty, with a black base and bright golden rays radiating outward from the center, like the sun's own hands reaching across your shoulders. The cloak fastens with a tupiu, a heavy silver pin shaped like a condor's wing. You feel the chill of the metal for just a second as it touches your collarbone, before the warmth of the wool settles back in. The attendants step back once everything is in place, their movements silent but purposeful. One of them brings a small mirror of polished obsidian, no larger than your palm, and holds it up without a word. You look, not to admire, but to check. The folds are smooth. The belt is straight. The clasp is level. You give a slight nod, and the mirror disappears. Now the final touch. Your masque pacha, the red fringe worn only by nobility of the royal class. Not even high priests may don it without permission. The strands are dyed with the cochineal insect, harvested carefully from cactus pads in the warmer valleys, crushed and mixed with chicha to deepen the tone. The result is a red so vivid it seems to pulse with light. The fringe is tied gently across your forehead by a senior attendant, an older man with slow hands and a calm breath. As he knots it in place, he murmurs something under his breath. Not a chant, not a blessing, just a rhythm. You don't ask what it means. You don't need to. Once the fringe settles against your brow, something shifts in the room. Not the air, but the weight of expectation. You are no longer simply you. You are now a living piece of the state, a moving symbol, an heir to tradition older than memory. Even your posture changes without thinking, shoulders back, chin level, arms relaxed but ready. Your body remembers the training you've endured since childhood. How to walk, when to speak, where to look, how long to hold a gaze. Outside, the sounds of the city are changing. The drums are louder. The conch shell sounds again, this time shorter, sharper. It means the inner court is assembling. Dignitaries from every corner of the empire will begin to arrive, clothed in the symbols of their provinces. But you, your cloak, your belt, your fringe, represent the heart. Before you exit the chamber, you pause for a moment near the open window. The light has changed. It's full now, spilling into the room in golden angles. You feel the sun touch the silver of your tupu and catch the red of your fringe, casting it onto the wall beside you like a shadow of a flame. For a brief second, you imagine you really do own the mountains, that they bow quietly when you walk past, that the valleys hush their winds until you've gone. But that thought passes, because in truth, you don't own anything. Not the fringe, not the cloak, not the mountains. You are their caretaker, their symbol, and they are watching to see what you'll do next. The door opens quietly. A messenger enters, head bowed, and informs you that the Sepa Inca will appear within the hour. You are expected in the Hall of Offerings. You nod, silently, and step forward, dressed like you belong to the mountains, dressed like you've always known how to carry them. By the time you leave the dressing chamber, the sun has risen far enough to spill over the eastern wall of the inner plaza. Light slices across the flagstones in long golden bars, warming the stone just enough to chase away the morning chill. You walk slowly, deliberately, the fringe of your masque-pacha swaying gently against your brow. People part for you, not out of fear, but respect. Here in Cusco, recognition carries more weight than authority. Everyone knows who you are, and everyone knows who you must be. The first part of the morning is taken by the Council of Kin, a formal gathering of nobles tied by blood or marriage to the royal house. It's not a boisterous affair. Voices stay low, eyes stay sharp. In a chamber lit only by sunlight and flickering flames, you take your seat on a carved stone bench. No one speaks out of turn. No one interrupts. The matters discussed are woven delicately. Tax grain surpluses from the Sacred Valley, labor levies being reorganized for a new storage complex, a minor dispute between two provinces over canal rights. Each topic is handled like an offering, carefully, with hands that know what these decisions cost. The Sepa Inca doesn't attend this meeting directly. He doesn't need to. His wishes arrive in the form of a priest who sits in the center of the room with a quiet authority that surpasses rank. He holds no scepter, wears no gold. But when he speaks, everyone listens. His voice is calm, never raised, and carries the weight of having spent years meditating in darkness beneath the Temple of the Sun. When he glances in your direction, you bow your head slightly, not as a noble to a subordinate, but as a citizen to the spirit of the empire itself. After council, you are escorted through a shaded corridor to the Temple of the Virgins, where you are to participate in a ceremonial offering. The Eklawasi is silent as always, the only sounds being the soft rustle of cotton garments and the click of sandals on stone. You pass through an archway carved with stars and into a courtyard lined with smooth obsidian tiles. At the center stands a low platform made of white stone. Upon it, flowers, chicha, crushed cochineal, and a tiny gold llama figure. One of the eldest priestesses steps forward and beckons. You kneel, take a pinch of the red powder, and sprinkle it onto the platform. The powder drifts like smoke, catching in the wind before it falls to the ground. The gold llama is then placed in your hands. You offer a silent prayer, not one of words, but of breath and posture, and set it gently beside the other offerings. For a moment, everything is still. Even the birds in the trees seem to wait. Then the priestess nods, and the spell breaks. The offering is accepted. You leave the temple quieter than you entered, your thoughts heavier somehow, not with guilt or burden, but with the strange clarity that comes from being reminded of your smallness in the face of the divine. That feeling won't last. The next event will ensure it doesn't, because now you must be seen. It begins in the plaza. The crowd has grown since the early hours. Traders, artisans, travelers from the provinces. Some are dressed plainly. Others wear garments that display their regional colors or their function. A runner's short tunic, potter's wrap, a mason's belt, but no one looks casual. Everyone is aware that the noble class will be passing through, and everyone wants to be seen watching. You step out into the light and immediately feel the eyes. They don't burn, but they press. You keep your posture tall, your hands clasped lightly in front, your gaze ahead. You walk as if you're following a path only you can see, not because you're ignoring the crowd, but because that's what they expect. You are not here to mingle. You are here to be a reminder that the Empire is working, stable, whole. At certain points along the walk, children step forward with gifts, woven bracelets, small wooden birds, tiny bundles of dried maize. You accept them with both hands, offering a nod or a gentle touch to the forehead, depending on the child's age. These gestures seem small, but they ripple through the crowd. A well-timed acknowledgement is worth more than a speech. The final stop is the Hall of the Ancestors, a high-walled court built with stones so large they look sculpted by giants. Inside, you bow before the mummified remains of past rulers, each seated in their own niche, clothed in woven finery, their faces hidden behind golden masks. You don't know how much of their true form remains beneath the wrappings. That's not the point. Their presence is symbolic, and symbol is the lifeblood of Cusco. A priest chants the lineage of the Inca aloud, tracing the bloodline from the mythical first couple who rose from Lake Titicaca all the way to the present emperor. Each name is spoken with reverence, like a note in a melody that must never be broken. When your own ancestor is mentioned, 4 generations back, you lower your eyes and place your hand flat over your heart. You hear the subtle shift in breath from the others nearby. They remember your line, and they remember what that means. After the ceremony, you're offered a seat near the platform for a brief audience with the High Priest of Inti. He's ancient, or at least he looks it, his eyes like wet stone, his voice dry as roasted maize. He asks no direct questions. Instead, he speaks of omens. 2 hawks flying west at dawn, a cracked stone in the temple's outer wall, the birth of twin llamas near the sacred spring. You listen carefully. This isn't superstition. It's language, the kind that means something very specific if you know how to hear it. You nod slowly, responding not with answers, but with measured reflections. He seems pleased, or at least not disappointed. When he dismisses you, you rise with a shallow bow and turn to leave. The sun is beginning to climb higher, casting sharper shadows. The heat presses against your cloak, and you begin to feel the weight of the morning, not just physically, but mentally. Being a noble in Cusco isn't tiring because of action. It's tiring because every breath must be calculated. Every word, every glance, every blink carries consequence. As you return to the upper terrace, where a shaded cup of water waits and a small snack of roasted corn and fruit has been laid out, you finally allow yourself to exhale. No one is watching now. For a few minutes, you're not a walking monument. You're just a person in ceremonial wool, breathing mountain air and trying not to drop chicha on your cloak. You close your eyes, and for a heartbeat, it's quiet. But in the distance, drums start again, and the sun, ever watching, has not moved its gaze. The midday conch echoes through the temple corridors with a low, spiraling tone that lingers for a moment before fading into the rhythm of footsteps on stone. It marks a pause, not a rest, and certainly not freedom from expectations. In Cusco, Even lunch is a subtle performance, a display wrapped in quiet manners and shared glances. You're guided through a shaded passageway toward the West Terrace, where sunlight filters through a fluttering linen canopy and the faint sound of flutes drifts in from somewhere beyond the market. The walkway is lined with carved niches holding small offerings, bundles of maize, crimson flower petals, and polished stones wrapped in woven cloth, tokens of gratitude or petitions placed by the lesser nobility. You pass them with a soft breath, your sandals tapping gently on the worn flagstones, and soon the path opens into the terrace where lunch has been prepared, not in grand banquet style, but with thoughtful attention to place and position. The West Terrace overlooks the llama pens and the smaller of the temple gardens. Beyond a low wall draped with flowering vines, 24 llamas graze and loaf in the sun, their necks adorned with red and black ribbons, indicating temple ownership. They move slowly, blinking in the brightness, occasionally humming or flopping into the dust, with the serene confidence of creatures that have never once considered public duty. Their presence brings a strange sort of comfort. You've always liked sharing space with them. They observe the world without rushing it, and they never pretend not to be watching. At the table, already seated and halfway through a maize cake, is your cousin Tika. She lifts her eyes as you approach, her expression hovering between amusement and accusation. "You're late," she remarks, as if she hasn't been waiting precisely to say that. You lower yourself onto the smooth stone bench across from her, adjusting the folds of your cloak so they fall neatly behind your back, and offer a mild shrug. "You're early." She tears off another piece of the cake, pops it into her mouth, and speaks while chewing with elegance that only a noble could make look deliberate. "I'm hungry." That's more virtuous than it sounds. The exchange is familiar, comforting in the way that only lifelong sparring partners can be. Lunch is less formal when shared with someone who already knows your titles and your worst childhood habits. The meal arrives without fanfare. Roasted potatoes fresh from the coals, grilled strips of llama meat seasoned with ground chili and wild herbs, stewed quinoa with garlic flowers, and a bowl of oca roots glistening with honey glaze. Clay cups of lightly fermented chicha stand at each place, and a small plate of avocado slices dusted with ground chili has been added, an indulgence, given their fragile journey from the lower valleys. You eat slowly, using your fingers to pinch small bites, the way you were taught, chewing with deliberate calm. Everything here has been grown, carried, or prepared by hands you'll likely never see. And in Cusco, that is not cause for guilt, but for gratitude expressed in restraint. As you eat, the conversation begins to slide in the way it always does, subtly and without announcement. Tika leans forward slightly, her eyes flicking toward the garden wall, as if watching for spies or simply bored llamas. "Did you hear about the coastal envoy?" She asks in a tone that promises a story worth chewing slower for. You raise an eyebrow and wait for clarification. The one who arrived with shell necklaces and 6 crates of dried fish and apparently hasn't visited the temple yet. You sip your chicha before responding. "He could be sick. Or stalling," she replies, tearing another bite from her maize cake. "Or still recovering from the altitude." Her tone is dry, but there's no real cruelty in it. Nobles rarely gossip to wound. They gossip to measure. Across the terrace, one of the llamas groans softly and flops onto its side, legs splayed like a dropped coat. You glance at it briefly before returning to your plate. "High altitude sorts the ambitious from the prepared," you say, and she snorts in agreement. "He brought salt in gourd jars and acted like it was a miracle," she adds. "As if we don't have salt. As if we haven't had salt since before his grandparents were fishmongers." You smile, letting her pace the conversation. Around nobles, gossip is never spoken loudly, but always spoken eventually. The matters of the state are decided in council, but the mood of the empire, that begins here, between bites of tubers and under canopies rustling in the sun, The food continues to arrive in waves. Grilled river fish wrapped in banana leaves, corn pancakes crisped at the edges, and a small bowl of toasted canca kernels, still warm and crackling. The final course is a bowl of lucuma fruit, creamy and golden, served with a drizzle of syrup and a few scattered crushed nuts. You eat it slowly, letting the richness linger as the flutes in the distance shift into a softer tune. It's meant to soothe digestion and ease the body into its next duty. The body may rest briefly, but the performance never truly ends. Tika sets her empty cup aside and tilts her head. There's a new marriage arrangement being whispered about, she says. Two noble houses from the southern plateau. One claims descent from a thunder spirit, the other from a particular shade of cloud. You raise an eyebrow and wait. Same cloud, she adds, allegedly. That's awkward, you reply. Can't marry someone from your own cloud. Not unless the cloud splits, she says. In which case, you need two dowries. One for each half. Her tone is perfectly straight, though her eyes shine with mischief. You both know the story is absurd. You both know it will likely become truth anyway. Lunch, like all things in Cusco, moves on without being announced. The sun climbs toward its peak, shadows shrink, and the heat softens the breeze beneath the canopy. A pair of servants step into the courtyard to clear the dishes, moving silently except for the occasional clink of ceramic. You dab your fingers with a cloth scented faintly with mint and coca leaves, then rise with care, the movement practiced and fluid. Across the garden wall, the llamas have migrated into the shade, gathered like sleepy judges who've seen too many nobles for one lifetime and decided none were worth standing up for. You pause for a moment to look at them, then at the sky, and finally back at the stone floor beneath your feet. The terrace is still. Your cousin says nothing else. She gives a single nod before turning to leave by a side corridor, her steps echoing softly between the columns. You remain behind for a moment longer, adjusting the fold of your cloak, taking one final breath of mountain air and honeyed maize before stepping back into the current of the day. There are ceremonies waiting, speeches that will be heard but not remembered, appearances to be made so the city can exhale and know the empire continues. You walk slowly toward the plaza, full but not sluggish, thinking not about the priest's next sermon or the high Inca's whispered omens, but about how satisfying that lucuma fruit was. Small pleasures have their place, even at the center of an empire. The afternoon fades gradually, casting Cusco in long gold slashes that drift through the courtyards and shimmer across the temple roofs. As the sun drops, its light grows softer, but the pace of the city does not. Sunset in the capital is not a time for winding down. It is a moment for presence. This is when the empire's eyes shift from labor to legacy, from markets and meals to ceremony and symbolism. And for nobles like you, it means moving into position, once again stepping into your role, not as a person with preferences, but as a function of the state's heart. The flutes begin first, echoing from the upper terraces and slowly joined by low drums that rumble like distant thunder across the plaza. The music is not urgent, but it's commanding. It marks the beginning of the evening rituals. You move toward the Temple of the Sun, not in a procession, but as part of the steady stream of the highborn, each dressed in carefully chosen cloaks and regalia that shimmer in the fading light like colored embers. Your own cloak has been changed during the afternoon break, now dyed a deep green to reflect the harvest season, embroidered at the hem with tiny gold leaves and vines. Your attendants walk behind you, silent but alert, ready to adjust folds or fetch ceremonial tools with quiet efficiency. As you step into the temple courtyard, the air grows heavier, not with heat, but with purpose. The Temple of the Sun is not just sacred, it is precise. Every wall was constructed to align with the solstices, every niche positioned with mathematical intent. At this hour, when the sun sinks low enough to slip through a narrow slit in the western wall, a beam of light falls perfectly onto the main altar, striking the polished gold sheep mounted behind it. The effect is almost blinding, a blaze of light that seems to hover just above the ground. This is the moment when the priests begin the chant. You kneel with the others, palms open, eyes lowered. The chant is ancient, but it never feels tired. The words have been shaped over centuries to match the breadth of the high altitude, each syllable designed to carry evenly into the corners of the temple. You don't need to know every meaning. That's not the point. This isn't about individual understanding. It's about collective rhythm. You lend your breath to the chant, just enough to feel part of the sound, not enough to draw attention. Once the last note fades, the fire is lit, not with flint or spark, but by using the sun's own reflection off a concave mirror. The flame catches quickly, feeding on carefully dried straw and llama fat. It is passed to smaller bowls, which are carried by robed novices to other parts of the temple complex, spreading light like veins from the heart. The symbolism isn't lost on anyone. The empire moves outward from this very courtyard, and every flame it holds begins here. After the ritual, you are summoned, not to the inner sanctum, but to the royal platform at the edge of the upper plaza. There, the Sapa Inca has taken his seat beneath a canopy of woven feathers and fine cloth, the fringe of his mezcapacha perfectly still despite the breeze. He does not speak yet. He waits. His presence is enough to command stillness across the courtyard. You approach slowly, bowing at the proper distance, and take your place to the right, where the senior nobles gather in order of rank. This evening, the duty is not debate, but declaration. A new canal system has been completed in the eastern province, and the tribute runners have arrived bearing offerings: sacks of dried fish, bolts of cotton, ceramic flasks of fermented fruit, and an elaborately carved staff that represents the local spirit of the new waterway. The provincial envoy steps forward and presents the staff, kneeling as he lifts it above his head. A priest steps forward to receive it, and the Sepa Inca finally raises his hand in approval. The crowd, which had remained silent for the better part of an hour, responds with a ripple of movement, shoulders straightening, eyes widening, hands pressed together in reverence. There's no cheering. There doesn't need to be. Approval is a sacred thing. It arrives like sunlight, without warning, without question. As the official offering ceremony ends, you remain in place, knowing your presence is still required. The evening may be advancing, but dusk in Cusco does not mean disappearance. It means recalibration. You are now expected to circulate, to walk the upper galleries, to be seen by temple workers, craftsmen, minor priests, and those whose duties allow them only brief glimpses of the ruling class. You offer quiet nods, pause to observe a painted mural depicting the royal lineage, offer a compliment on the symmetry of a newly planted garden. None of it feels important in the moment, yet you know it is. These gestures are the daily stitching that keeps the empire from unraveling. Later, a short private audience is arranged with the chief architect, who wishes to discuss a structural adjustment to one of the grain storage towers north of the city. It's not a glamorous topic, but his concern is legitimate. A shift in water runoff patterns has threatened the integrity of one of the lower terraces. You listen, ask questions, nod at the right moments. You don't pretend to know more than you do, but you also don't defer needlessly. Part of your role is to offer confidence, not just in decisions, but in your presence. The architect leaves satisfied that his concern has been heard. And tomorrow, a team of stonemasons will begin reinforcing the terrace with new drainage channels. No ceremony will mark that work, but its success will ripple further than any procession. The final act of the evening is the shared offering of coca leaves beneath the sky. No temple walls, no incense. Just a circle of nobles and priests, standing on the palace's uppermost balcony as the stars begin to emerge, flickering like slow embers above the jagged silhouettes of the mountains. Each person steps forward in turn, selects 3 leaves, always 3, and places them on a small stone slab shaped like a sunburst. You take your turn without speaking, letting the leaves flutter from your fingers and land lightly on the stone. The breeze lifts one and carries it upward for a second before it falls back, settling against the others. The priest nearby closes the ritual with a low hum, not quite a chant, but more than silence. With that, the formal part of your duties ends. You descend the staircase with steady steps, your cloak brushing softly against the polished stone, the fringe of your belt swaying with each motion. Behind you, the balcony empties slowly. Ahead, the corridor to your private chamber glows with torchlight, flickering across murals and mosaics that have watched countless nobles pass before you. You do not rush. You do not drag your feet. You walk with the rhythm the city expects of you. Measured, quiet, permanent. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, and with it, another day of rituals, responsibilities, and careful movements across the stone veins of an empire that never sleeps. But for now, the city exhales. The wind is cool, the fires burn low, and the mountain holds your footsteps like a memory. The stars return slowly over Cusco, one by one, like shy guests slipping into a gathering they've attended 1,000 times before. They don't announce themselves with fanfare or proclamation. They simply arrive, flickering gently above the jagged crown of the mountains, each one taking its ordained place in the vast theater of sky. First comes the brightest, the one the children call the shepherd's eye, who watches over the flocks on distant hillsides. Then her sisters join her, smaller but no less faithful, until they trace shapes across the velvet sky that every child in the empire learns to name before they can walk steady on stone steps. The llama, the serpent, the river twins. These aren't constellations as outsiders know them. Those foreign star readers who see lions and hunters and water bearers drawn in points of light. No, these are different altogether, older and more intimate. They aren't made of dots in the sky, but of the inky spaces between, the dark rivers winding across the Milky Way, drawing their stories in negative space, in shadow and silence. The ancestors knew that sometimes the most important things are found, not in what shines, but in what holds the darkness steady. You lie on your back in the noble courtyard garden, looking up from a woven mat that still holds the faint scent of mountain grass and highland wool. Your cloak, dyed the deep blue-black of lake water at dusk, is tucked carefully around your shoulders, its golden threads catching the first starlight like captured fireflies. The chill of night rises from the earth beneath you, like breath from stone, patient and persistent, reminding you that even in the heart of the greatest city in the world, the mountains are always close, always watching. Around you, the capital has settled into its quieter rhythms, the way a great instrument shifts from the bold declarations of day to the subtle murmurs of evening. The runners are done for their daily circuits, their leather sandals hung on wooden pegs to dry, their powerful legs finally still after carrying messages across distances that would humble condors. Their breath has settled now, no longer coming in the controlled bursts of those who race against time and terrain. In their rest houses, they sleep the deep sleep of those who have served the Empire's need for connection, its endless hunger for news and commands to flow like rivers between peaks. The markets have closed their colorful chaos, their stalls now covered with woolen cloths in patterns that tell their own stories. Geometric designs that speak of rain and harvest, of mountains and sacred directions. The vendors have returned to their homes, carrying the day's silver and small treasures, their voices no longer calling out the virtues of purple maize and fine alpaca wool. Even the children who dart between the stalls like quick-footed mice have been called home, their laughter fading into the stone streets like the last notes of a song. Even the flutes have gone quiet, their final notes trailing off an hour ago with the dusk ceremonies, when the priests offered smoke and prayers to the setting sun. Those haunting melodies that drifted through the city all day, music for work, for worship, for the simple joy of breath turned into beauty, have dissolved into memory and echo. The musicians have packed their instruments in soft cloths, their lips still holding the shape of the last song, their fingers still remembering the positions that turned air into magic. All that remains now is the soft hiss of torches guttering against the temple walls, a sound like gentle rainfall or distant conversation. The flames bend and straighten in the mountain breeze, casting dancing shadows that seem to tell stories of their own against the precisely cut stones. And there, floating through the silence like a dream half remembered, comes the occasional distant bleat of a llama trying to settle into peaceful dreams, perhaps disturbed by some night sound or simply conversing with the stars in the way animals do when they think no humans are listening. Cusco never truly sleeps. The great cities of the world never do, for they are too full of life and purpose and the endless small dramas of existence. But it knows how to whisper after dark, how to turn its voice down to match the quiet dignity of night. The city understands that there are different kinds of power, the bold strength of daylight ceremonies and the subtle influence of starlight contemplation. Your attendant, a quiet young woman named Shuya, whose name means clear like mountain water, has left a small offering beside your mat before retiring to her own rest. There is a bowl of roasted maize, each kernel golden and perfect, popped over carefully tended coals until they taste of earth and fire. Beside it, a smaller vessel holds coca leaves, their surfaces still dusted with the sacred white powder of ground seashells, brought from the distant ocean by runners who cross deserts to deliver this blessing. And finally, a clay cup of warm herbal broth, fragrant with herbs whose names are whispered only by the healers. Muna for the stomach, Taranjul for the heart, and something else, something that tastes of mountain mist and grandmother's hands. The steam curls upward from the cup, catching the starlight in faint silver ribbons that twist and dissolve into the night air. You sip it slowly, letting the warmth spread through your chest like liquid comfort, feeling it chase away the mountain cold that creeps in despite your fine cloak and sheltered position. The taste is complex, bitter and sweet, earthy and clean, with an undertone that speaks of high places where the air is thin and the silence profound. It's calming, this drink, and functional in the way all things are in the Empire, meant to settle the stomach and smooth out the racing thoughts that daylight brings, preparing the mind for dreams and the body for rest. You're not expected anywhere for the rest of the night. No speeches to give in council chambers where your words must be measured like precious metals. No rituals to perform before crowds of upturned faces. No responsibilities that require you to be anything other than yourself, breathing quietly under the vast sky. But even now, even in this moment of personal peace, you can feel it. The Empire hums softly beneath you, like the slow pulse of a sleeping mountain, like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient and utterly alive. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the garden walls and through the maze of stone corridors, a priest is humming. Not a formal chant with its rigid rhythms and prescribed intonations, but something quieter, more personal, an old tune meant for children just learning to sleep alone, or perhaps a melody for ancestors who might be listening from their places among the peaks. It floats through the garden's woven walls like smoke from a distant fire, settling into the stones as if the very walls were learning the melody, becoming a lullaby not meant for anyone in particular, and yet entirely meant for you, for this moment, for this breathing space between the demands of day and the dreams of night. You find yourself staring at the sky longer than usual tonight, your eyes tracing the faint path of what might be a moving star, perhaps one of those wandering lights the astronomers track with such careful attention, or maybe a spirit on its slow return journey to the high peaks, where the gods listen best and prayers rise unimpeded into the infinite. There is something hypnotic about watching that distant light travel its ancient path, something that makes time feel both eternal and fleeting, as if you could lie here forever, or as if this moment might vanish like breath in cold air. As your thoughts drift like clouds across the mental landscape, so too does memory. rising unbidden from the deep pools of consciousness. You think of the offerings placed earlier at the Temple of the Virgins, the tiny golden llama no bigger than your thumb, but perfect in every detail, crafted by artisans whose skills have been passed down through generations like precious secrets. You remember the soft weight of the cochineal powder in your palm, that red as deep as sunset on snow, as rich as the blood that flows through your veins. You recall the careful bow of your head, the way the temple stones seemed to acknowledge your presence, the sense of continuity that connected you to every person who had ever made such offerings in such a place. You think of the stone terraces that climb the mountainsides, like giant steps built for gods, laid long before your birth by hands that have long since returned to earth, yet still holding crops and retaining precious rainwater, as if they remember better than you do how to survive in this land of extremes. Each terrace is a testament to human ingenuity and divine partnership, a collaboration between mortal skill and mountain wisdom that has fed the empire for generations beyond counting. Your mind drifts to Pachacuti, the great earthshaker, who once walked these same stones with feet as mortal as yours, who breathed the same thin air and looked up at these same stars. His shadow still lingers over the city, like the last light of sunset. It clings to mountain peaks long after darkness has claimed the valleys. You can almost feel his presence in the perfectly fitted stones, in the precise angles of the buildings, in the way the entire city seems to grow from the mountain itself rather than being imposed upon it. The past in Cusco is never gone, never relegated to memory alone. It is layered like sediment in a riverbank. It is beneath your feet, in the walls around you, in the very sky above, alive and breathing and utterly present. As you curl onto your side, the woven mat crinkling softly beneath you with the whispered sound of dried grass, your mind wanders to the quiet stories, the ones not spoken in formal councils or proclaimed in public plazas, but whispered behind curtains of fine cloth and over shared bowls of corn porridge at midnight when the official day has ended and the human day begins. These are the stories that live in the spaces between official history, in the shadows cast by torchlight, in the quiet moments when people speak truth instead of protocol. Stories of lost trails that lead to hidden valleys where the old gods still walk among flowering trees. Tales of secret chambers beneath the city, connected by passages known only to the stones themselves. Whispered accounts of messengers who ran until they vanished into mist, carrying messages too important or too dangerous for ordinary understanding. Legends of stones that moved when no one was looking, rearranging themselves according to purposes known only to the earth. And always, threading through all the whispered tales like a golden thread, the story of a great disk of sun metal hidden somewhere in the earth, buried not for safety from enemies, but so it might be found when the time is right, when the world has greatest need of the light it holds. No one repeats these things in daylight, when the sun's harsh brightness makes all mysteries seem foolish and all secrets feel like children's games. But they return at night, when the stars are bright and the torches burn low, and when even the mountains seem to lean in to listen, their massive shoulders shifting imperceptibly toward the city as if they too are curious about the small dramas and large dreams of the humans who shelter in their shadow. You watch your breath rise and fall in the cold air, each exhalation visible as a small cloud that dissipates quickly into the larger darkness, a visible rhythm against the silence that reminds you of your place in the vast breathing of the world. And you feel, just for a moment, that strange sensation of being both completely alone, one small consciousness under an infinite sky, and deeply connected to something larger than individual existence. The capital is quiet, yes, but it isn't empty. It breathes with 10,000 dreams and 100,000 heartbeats. You know others lie in their own courtyards at this very moment, looking up at the same stars, thinking their own thoughts, weaving their own hopes and fears into the same night sky that holds you all like a blanket woven from darkness and starlight. You imagine a servant boy resting on the wooden roof beams of his master's house, his young legs dangling over the edge, chewing coca leaves and imagining a life as one of the honored runners, seeing himself racing along mountain paths with messages that could change the fate of provinces. You picture a noble widow in her private terrace garden, pouring water into the earth with careful reverence and speaking softly to the shadow of her departed husband, telling him about the day's small victories and quiet sorrows. You envision a temple novice, perhaps no older than 15, carefully scribbling glyphs on his palm by the light of a small oil lamp, practicing the names of constellations and the prayers that go with them before sleep overtakes his eager mind. You don't know these people personally. The city is too vast, too full of individual lives for any one person to know them all. But you do know them in the way that fellow travelers know each other, in the way that all who share the same sky and the same hopes understand something fundamental about each other without ever speaking. The city breathes with them, and so do you. In the great rhythm of Cusco's existence, you are all notes in the same eternal song. The torch beside your mat crackles as the flame leans low, almost as if bowing respectfully to the wind that has traveled down from the glacial peaks. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, gathering its warmth closer to your skin, and settle deeper into the mat. One hand rests lightly over your stomach, feeling the gentle rise and fall of your breath, while the other is tucked beneath your cheek, a gesture as old as childhood and as natural as heartbeat. A faint rustle in the garden suggests movement, perhaps a small rodent investigating the herbs for late-night sustenance, or maybe a night bird stirring among the leaves, disturbed by some sound too subtle for human ears. You don't mind these small intrusions. They are part of the rhythm, part of the evidence that life continues in all its forms, even when the human world pauses for rest. Cusco is not still. Cities never truly are. It simply turns its voice down after dark, modulates its energy to match the quieter frequencies of night. Above you, the dark Llama constellation rises higher in its eternal journey across the sky, its black body stretching between the stars that mark its hooves and muzzle with perfect clarity. The people believe it drinks from the celestial river that flows overhead, and when it does, when it lowers its star-marked head to taste the cosmic waters, the rainy season begins on Earth below. Tonight, it looks particularly thirsty, its position suggesting an eagerness that the priests and astronomers will certainly note. You wonder if they are watching from their observation towers, if someone is already interpreting this stellar thirst for tomorrow's council meetings, preparing to advise on planting schedules and water management. Or perhaps someone, somewhere in the vast network of the Empire, will dream of rain tonight and wake with the sudden, inexplicable urge to plant seeds, to prepare fields, to ready the earth for the gift of water that falls from sky to soil in the eternal cycle that keeps the world alive and fed. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to listen better, to hear the subtler sounds that daylight and visual distraction often obscure. The wind slides along the rooftops with the whispered sound of silk against stone, pausing to investigate the temple walls with curious fingers, and then continuing on its journey toward the mountains that gave it birth. There is a quiet heartbeat in the city tonight, soft and steady, like a drum played in some distant courtyard, not for ritual or ceremony, but simply to remind the sky that someone is still awake, still keeping vigil, still maintaining the connection between Earth and stars that is humanity's oldest responsibility. And just before sleep begins to pull at the edges of your thoughts with gentle insistence, just as your breath slows to match the mountain's own deep rhythm, the faintest echo of a footstep sounds in the corridor beyond your garden wall. The sound is soft but distinct, leather on stone, purposeful but unhurried. You don't open your eyes. You don't need to. The sound is familiar, not alarming, part of the night's natural rhythm, rather than an intrusion upon it. Someone walking toward the inner temple, most likely a priest beginning the sacred midnight, fire tending that keeps the eternal flames burning through the hours of darkness. Or perhaps a courier returning late from some distant province, his message already delivered into waiting hands, his mind already drifting toward his next period of rest, his body carrying the satisfied weariness of duty fulfilled. The Empire never fully sleeps. How could it, when it spans such distances and encompasses so many lives, when messages must flow and watch must be kept, and the great mechanisms of civilization must continue their turning? But you can sleep. Here, within the stone arms of Cusco, beneath the watchful eyes of gods and ancestors, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom and strength of generations, you are held safe. And as the fire dims beside you and the stars shift in their slow procession above, their ancient dance continuing as it has for millennia and will for millennia to come, it's time to let the city breathe without your conscious attention for a while. Time to trust that the world will continue in its turning, that the Empire will endure through the night, that tomorrow will come with its own gifts and challenges and opportunities for service. The stone beneath you is cool, but not cold, solid and reassuring, like the foundations of everything that matters. The wind is soft, carrying scents of herbs and distant snow, of cooking fires and temple incense, of the vast living complexity that is civilization nestled in the embrace of wilderness. The night is yours, not to possess, but to be held by, to rest within, to let yourself become part of the greater dreaming that encompasses all who sleep under these particular stars. And now, as your breath deepens and your thoughts dissolve into the peaceful stillness that precedes dreams, as your body settles fully into the earth's patient embrace, and your spirit prepares for whatever journeys sleep might bring, we gently turn our attention away from the sleeping capital, away from your quietly breathing form, and toward the close of our shared journey through this night in ancient Cusco. The stars continue their watch. The city continues its breathing. And somewhere in the vast tapestry of existence, another day prepares to dawn. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the dizzying heights of the Andes to the cold breath of the morning stone. From the aching backs of road crews carving paths through clouds to the silent rituals behind Cusco's golden walls. From the lost trails swallowed by forest to the whispered duties of nobles dressed like walking constellations. A long, quiet walk along the spine of an empire that never needed wheels to move the world. If you're still awake, thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the llamas and the rope bridges, or sometime around sunset chants and starlit gardens, that's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the whole point. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly journey through Inca history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. I love seeing where in the world these late-night wanderings are keeping you company. For now, I'll let the highland winds settle, the footsteps on stone fade to silence, and the constellations turn slowly overhead, just as they always have. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.